This House is in session. I wish to welcome the students of St. Martin's Mangrove Primary School and their two teachers, Ms. Michelle Cave and Ms. Stacia Squires Cave. I hope you all enjoy today's proceedings in these chambers. And I hope that at lunch you find time to ask questions of all the ministers in here so that they can show you how the process of democracy works and that you will be the wiser at the end of the day. Welcome once again. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, October 11th, 2022 to be confirmed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions, papers.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm commanded to lay the 2020 annual report on the audited financial statements of the National Petroleum Corporation for the period ended March 31st, 2020.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to give notice of the Civil Aviation Bill 2022, as well as the Civil Aviation Air Navigation Service and Investigation of Accidents Bill 2022. I also wish to give notice of the resolution that Parliament accepts the Barbados National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan 2020 as the guiding national policy document for the management and conservation of biodiversity in Barbados and the associated reports.
Private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills.
Honourable Member St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the first reading of the second reading of the Civil Aviation Bill, first reading of the Civil Aviation Bill and the first reading of the Civil Aviation Air Navigation Service and Investigation of Accidents Bill 2022 be taken as a cognate debate.
No, to be read the first time.
We read it first time, sorry.
The questions that the aforementioned bills be read the first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43 and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government Business is the order of the day.
Order number 6, in the name of the Honourable Senior Minister, the Minister of Energy and Business Development, to move the second reading of the Civil Aviation Bill 2022.
Honourable Member St. James Central.
Move that the second reading of the Civil Aviation Bill, together with the second reading of the Civil Aviation Air Navigation Service and Investigation of Accident Bill 2022 be taken together as a cognate debate.
The question that the aforementioned bills be read as a cognate debate as they are inextricably linked. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned bills will be read as a cognate debate. Honourable Member St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to thank the House for this opportunity to pilot this very important piece of legislation. Sir, once again, we are taking the opportunity to come before you and by extension, through you, sir, the country of Barbados, to have a discussion and I hope a very penetrative discussion on the issue of growth and competitiveness and the avenues through which that can be achieved. Mr. Speaker, sir, I know that like myself, you would have had the opportunity to serve in the other place, and that very often one of the advantages of that exposure to the other place is that we have the opportunity to talk at length on the substance of developmental issues without the partisan political rancor that often attaches to this lower chamber. And the truth of the matter is, sir, that ever so often we come across a national discourse or debate as part of our national discourse that must be treated in this particular way. I am pleased for a number of reasons, sir, that we have come to this point today in order to have this kind of a conversation. Let me say to you, Mr. Speaker, that one of the reasons why I'm particularly pleased is that even you're not allowed, sir, to see the strangers in the gallery, though you have made a recognition of those present. But we have some of the nation's fine young primary school students. And it is important, sir, for them to grow up in a world in which they have opportunity and in which they can dream big dreams and be party to avenues of activity in Barbados which are wholesome and developmental, and which, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, your generation and mine were not privy to. What we are about to do in this place today, sir, is to open up yet another one of those avenues. When you hear the people who live in splendid isolation on the hill, Cave Hill, sir, speaking to questions of the economy and growth, there is the feeling you get that this can only be done by way of this particular course of investment and facilitating foreign investment with concessions, et cetera, et cetera. But, sir, there are many ways that we can get this economy to grow and many ways in which we can make it competitive. I recall that there is a piece of legislation that is still before the House, the Metrology Bill, that is quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, yet another way in which we will see competitiveness and efficiency come into the Barbados economy by virtue of introducing a strong adherence to standards in our business and commercial practices, because these are some of the things that we need to do. These are some of the things that we have failed to do, and we've kicked the can down the road in successive administrations to the detriment of the greater good of the Barbados economy and the people of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, today we will have a candid conversation about the state of affairs at Grantley Adams International Aerodrome, not just the airport, but the aerodrome, that total physical infrastructure that is used for multiple purposes, and, sir, must be a place which is used to its fullest economic and commercial potential. That we have built out a tourism industry that is the envy of the Eastern Caribbean, sir. That we have been able to come to a point where those who market Barbados, and who do so very well, may I add, have been able to say to the world that this is a destination that stands shoulder to shoulder with some of the world's most splendid destinational experiences. Qatar and Dubai, Mr. Speaker, is something about which we should be proud. But even as we have been able to say that to the world, what we have failed to do is to maximize the commercial and economic potential of the aerodrome, which makes the visit to Barbados possible. It is a short-sightedness, a benighted short-sightedness that has scarred successive generations in this country by depriving them of developmental opportunity and economic opportunity, more importantly, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I reflect on the fact that we have these lovely young people with us, because the tomorrow that they will inherit must be an inheritance, sir, that is an inheritance of bounty, and that the opportunity that they have, sir, must be to be a part of a Barbadian society and economy that offers them more than what I had when I was their age, sir, and more opportunity than what you had when you were their age. And if we are not mindful that that is the mission that we should be on, sir, we ought not, frankly, to be in this place. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to start by saying to you that this is, for some, going to be an esoteric issue because it is difficult to understand, but I'm going to walk the House through it and the nation by extension, sir, slowly, because, again, I believe that it is only by dint of our commitment to do the necessary diligence and to do the necessary heavy lifting that we will give Barbados the opportunities that it must get. It is critical and indispensable, in my view, Mr. Speaker, that the artery of that we're going to open, the aerodrome, be allowed to lend us the competitiveness that we need. We, sir, only a year ago, just short of a year, celebrated the launch of a new journey. We became a republic. It has, in my view, sir, to mean something other than a republic song and a Barbados Day and a lot of sentimental experience. It has to have substance behind it, sir. It has to mean that we as a people are prepared now to do the things that we didn't do before. And among those things, sir, is to align the institutions in this country with international best practices. It also means, sir, that we must so align those institutions that they, as I said, become arteries of opportunity for the development of our people. Now, the Civil Aviation Bill of 2022 is aimed at establishing what we will call a Civil Aviation Authority. Civil aviation in Barbados, sir, has been obviously around for a long time. I believe the first aircraft to land here may have done so sometime in the 1940s. We have seen the airport, expand physically in terms of its campus. We have seen a lot more commercial passenger traffic come to Barbados. We have doubled our little toe in the water with a flight school, Mr. Speaker. We have had the benefit of our own air traffic control tower, where we offer air navigation services, sir. We have trained people, but what we have failed to do is to sustain these efforts in a meaningful way and to develop them, sir, to the fullest of their potential. And perhaps if you think it through, you will realize that all of those things that I talk about are things, sir, that should bring revenue into the country. So it begs the question, if you know that it is a thing that will bring revenue into the country, why do we not then develop it to our fullest potential? What could be the reason, the logical reason, that we know there are services, there are training opportunities, etc., at the aerodrome, but we have never gone that next step to have a dedicated effort to make sure that our aerodrome is the best that it can possibly be, and, by extension, the best that the Eastern Caribbean has to offer. That has not, unfortunately, sir, been part of the discourse. It has, as with so many other things with respect to this administration, fallen to us now to do those things that previous generations who sat in this parliament have not done. And we, sir, do not shy away or shrink from that duty. This is something that we face, as difficult as it is. And in the course of the discussion today, sir, I'm going to bring you and the country face to face with some of the challenges that we've had to treat to as time has gone by. So we are really, sir, looking at an opportunity to reform the civil aviation sector by creating a couple of things. First, we want the civil aviation sector, and civil aviation sector is just a fancy way of saying that the business of having aircraft come into Barbados, bringing passengers, being fueled, refueled, service, etc., can become a larger ecosystem, an economic system of activity, which is more sweeping and more capable of offering opportunities for people to get more jobs in aviation. And we want to reform that sector, sir, by creating separate and segregated roles for those people who will have to do regulation, and on the other hand, Mr. Speaker, sir, separate and segregated roles for those people who are simply the service providers. No, sir. Why is this important? If you look critically at the airport, not saying, sir, as some do, that looking at the airport means you go up there and look at the physical plant, but you look at the airport's operation, you will see, sir, that the regulation of the things that happen in the airport, the management of it, the control of the operations, the control of important procedures and processes, Mr. Speaker, sir, the regulation of activity at the airport is done by the same entity that is the service provider at the airport. So that there is, in a real sense, a conflict of interest, because I am providing the service, but at the same time I regulate myself. I recall, sir, when I was the substantive Minister of Tourism and International Transport, coming to this place, I'm making the point that one of the easiest errors that we could correct was the absence of having commercial revenue drives at the Grantley Adams International Airport. Because the airport really, the airside experience, should be a shopping mall, where everybody who lives in Barbados will have an opportunity to walk through. And everybody, quite frankly, sometimes if you could get them on the arrival side too, give them an opportunity to walk through and spend a little money. And that you had to have a variety of opportunities for people where they sat waiting on an aircraft, sir, to be tempted and induced to come into a well-appointed store or a nicely and tastefully designed kiosk. Because for me, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, the airport should have been reflecting the smallest of our vendors as well as the largest of our business people. So that you can have the people who are selling diamonds and jewelry, but you must also have the people who are making some leathercraft shoes, though. And the fact is, sir, that is the commercial revenue opportunity that we let go a begging. Behind that, sir, was obviously the thinking that, well, to get that to work realistically, we got to do a lot of fundamental repairs and rehabilitation and reconfiguration of the campus, and to make it bigger, better, more appealing, more attractive, more efficient, et cetera, things that we have not seriously looked at. And so that is why we have the ongoing discussions and plans about how we're going to redesign the whole thing and make it function under concession. But that is not what this is about entirely today. That is only in part, because that, sir, is the service provider side. But who would regulate them? They can't be regulated by the same people who are doing the service provider side, sir. There has to be somebody who stands at a distance and says, this is acceptable, this is not. This is how we're going to develop, this is the expansion plan. This is not in accordance with the expansion plan. There has to be somebody, sir, who looks at the totality of the airport experience and says it is not only about what you're seeing in terms of the waiting on an aircraft to come and pick you up, but it is also, sir, what else the airport does. And what does it do? There is at the Grantley Adams Airport a flight training school, is there not? Yeah. But we don't develop it, Mr. Speaker, sir. There is at the Grantley Adams International Airport a lovely tower, badly in need of repair, because that too is one of the burdens that we inherited from the last administration. And you can't fix everything in one fell swoop. But if I tell you how bad it was, and if I remind you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that under that last administration, there was indeed a plan that would see the runway, which we had to fix, by the way, because the runway had outlived its useful life. And I well remember working with the then minister in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, she who ably represents the constituency of St. Michael's South Central. And we came in and we got that runway rehabilitated with a loan that was 1/3 of the amount of money that the Democratic Party wanted to organize. And built into that, large slew of money that they were purporting to spend, that trough, sir, was some talk about the tower. And the tower, sir, no, a lot of superfluous thing. The tower, sir, was supposed to be another 50 or 60 million on top of the runway project. So, you know, again, part of what we don't keep noise about these things, but when you hear those who are washed in the blood of the Lamb and would want to give lectures as to how governance should go, you know, you have to remind them sometimes, sir, of where we came from. There are those who feel, sir, that has been an easy task, but it has not been. But the point is that the regulatory aspect of the airport must treat, therefore, to things like air navigation services that we offer. And not just to look at it, but to regulate it in a way that ensures continuous training for the people who offer those services. They must be trained. They must be retrained. They must be kept abreast of the most recent developments. Because when an aircraft is coming into land and it is not using sight but rather instrument, there's a completely different thing than if you land in by sight. And the instrument flight rules, therefore, visual flight rules, sir, are different concepts, and there must be people who are up there who are comfortable and versed in these things. It is not everybody who can do that. Sir, you know, I walk down Broad Street and find an air traffic controller at every corner. So that, therefore, the building out of those specific skill sets, the ability to come to an aircraft and to walk around the body of the aircraft and do an inspection of the camouflage and the structure, and then, sir, make a determination of airworthiness is a critical component of the process. Not everybody can do that. But you have to maintain a staff of people who are competent and trained as an inspectorate, that they can be certified and can in turn certify those who are performing that role and that function. Above and beyond that, sir, any serious aerodrome must be a place where you have new regulations and up-to-date regulations ensuring security. Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about security, because our airport is protected by a perimeter fence. Yeah? How many times have you passed, Mr. Speaker, and see a hole in the fence around Bradley Adams Airport? Our airport, sir, our airport security is an issue. And there's some other aspects of that conversation, sir, which are obviously national security matters, and I'm not going to delve too deeply into them. But the issue of being able to maintain satisfactory levels of security, satisfactory levels, sir, by way of regulations so to protect safety, those, sir, are the regulatory concerns that have to be set apart from just the service provision concerns. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we need to have an institutional framework which allows for us to be at that point which the leading countries in the aviation world have reached, because it is them that we are competing with, and we must stay abreast of the best in the pack, sir, if we are to maintain a standard, that word again, standard, that word that Barbadians do not like me to use, standard, that best practice that allows us to remain competitive, and more importantly, avoids the country being negatively listed as a place that you should allow aircraft to fly into. And you understand the severe danger of us not being able to maintain the standard. Because when the international rating agencies in aviation, the Federal Aviation Authority, the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, do their testing, perform their audits, they don't come here just to say, oh, Barbados is a warm destination with sunshine and nice people. They come here to look critically at that which we do and to pass a judgment on the standard of what we do. And when they rate us negatively or as being deficient, the consequence can be, sir, that you say, no, until they can get their act together, there's too much of a risk. We came dangerously close, sir, with a runway that was supposed to have lived a life of 18 years, or 16 years, but had gone on up to 20-odd years, Mr. Speaker, and had not been rehabilitated. We came dangerously close to inviting that kind of censure on ourselves. Now, that's why I say sometimes it is important to have these developmental discussions, because people feel that we can continue to be in a frivolous world of public administration, where you get elected by people, but you must not speak truth to the people who elected you. Well, I believe, sir, that those who elected me to perform a role of leadership. They knew that they were electing a person to go to Parliament to act in a leading capacity and to be a voice on their behalf. And if it therefore means, sir, that I have to come here and say uncomfortable things that are uncomfortable to hear, it is not because, sir, I am a terrible person. It is because, sir, I want for this country to get to be the best that it can be. I don't want to live in a country, sir, where people, and I will say this again, because I think that they misappreciate the substance of the issue. I am aggrieved. I am aggrieved and I am ashamed that a young man who went to the university with me is an acclaimed political scientist, but doesn't quite get it. That it can't be a misspeak if a man says that the Light and Power carried a 20-somebody million bill for the government of Barbados, because when this administration came into office, the government that we inherited could not pay bills to keep street lights on in your constituency, sir. How were the ladies to get home crossing the path through the night? How are the ladies leaving the West Coast hotels at 10:30 and 11 o'clock to walk through a Carrot Road in my constituency, sir, to get home safely? And the government relied on the utility. There are water resources in this country, sir, that the government couldn't pay, the BWA could not pay for. The utility had to carry that. Utility had to keep people in all of our constituencies with an ability to have fresh meat in the house. As Minister of Commerce, sir, I know the kind of assistance we gave to the fishermen, because we wanted people to get the protein. But the reality is, sir, the fish got to be kept on ice. You can't keep it on ice if the fridge turn off because they need electricity. But nobody working in the house can't pay the electric bill. So I only say that to say that there comes a time when all of us in here have to be prepared to deal with the idle chatter of those out there who do not have to carry the burden of responsibility of leadership that we carry. Because we must live in a country where there is a fairness and an ease of comprehension on these issues. And that is why I say it worries me that you see evidence of this creeping level of financial unintelligence, even at the highest level of our society sometimes. Back to the question of standards, sir. So all of we are doing today is taking us to a point where we will have full separation of the roles of the regulator and the role of the service provider, and we will have compliance, sir, with international best practice in the public interest. Now, sir, it means, therefore, that there has to be a new level of impartiality and safety oversight functions. It can't be anymore that a civil aviation department exists in Barbados and that they can employ people on the basis of the fact that thing is my friend or I know his father. It can't be, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you do not have a body of regulators or a body of investigators and inspectors who have the requisite capacity and have the equipment and the tools to adequately dispense their job of safety oversight and ensuring security, sir. It can't be that there's an airport where you arrive, sir, and say, you know who I am? My God, again there, man, I got a brother that coming in this evening. Don't smile, Mr. Speaker. That is the country that you and I grew up in, but it cannot be the country that those young people inherit. Because you know who I am. Too many have seen it. You show up at the door of the airport, the security guard properly says, but no, you can't. You know who I am? And you push past it and go along. Because your brother had a big post in the airport, your sister has a big post in the airport, you were a former minister at the airport. All of that has happened in Barbados, sir. It is deeply unfortunate, but it is part of the truth, the uncomfortable truth that we have to be able to speak to our people if we are to transition to be the place that we want the country to be. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that is really the root of the conversation that we're going to have as we go forward. Now, sir, we are proposing to have what we call a full separation model. And you were asked, Senior Minister, what is that? What is a full separation model? And I would have to say to you, sir, that it will be a new legal framework which will rest on 4 limbs. The first limb, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that of regulatory, of policy making with relation to operations management of the aerodrome. The second limb, sir, it will be a regulatory limb, and it will treat a legal regime at the aerodrome. It will be a legal framework for the institution of best practices, for the institution of safety measures, and for continuous oversight. Because let us not fool ourselves, sir. There are many efforts that have been made by the government of Barbados, both governments, and in this debate, sir, I will not be partisan political on the efforts that have been made. Because what we are talking about, sir, has been a national failing. And I want you, sir, to hear me. It has been a national failing that we must collectively work to fix. The attitude, Mr. Speaker, that tells anybody that they have a right to show up at a national security installation like the Grantley Adams International Airport and say, you know who I am, and that should allow you access to prohibited and restricted areas, sir. That ain't got nothing to do with no political party. That has to do with a cultural mentality that has sprung up in Barbados, where people believe or have been led to believe that there are some to whom the rules do not apply. And we have to make sure that the rules apply across the board, irrespective of who in or who is not in office, irrespective of the relationship you have with who is in or not in office, or who is in an administrative position or has been in an administrative position at the airport. The other limb, Mr. Speaker, sir, because you remember I said therefore, is the limb of accident investigation. And I'm going to speak a little bit to accident investigation in this house, because there are some startling things that we need to treat to. And equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, the question of air navigation services. Now, sir, you may well ask me the next question. If we are going to have a new legal framework, which is called a full separation model, where we separate the regulator from the service provider, what is the benefit of the model? And it is simply that the airport service provider will be contracting with passenger airlines, contracting with regard to the provision of cargo operations, making sure that airside commercial vending can take place, Mr. Speaker, sir, services for facilitating those activities like customs and immigration, all of those services, plant quarantine, health, all of those must be at the airport. But equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, the model must have a standalone regulatory authority, which is going to be characterized by independent investigators, a body of inspectors, sir, ongoing training and retraining of the specialist staff that are there to keep them top of their game, that we must have at any given time, sir, in the tower, trained and competent. When I say trained, not they were trained 20 years ago or 15 years ago or 5 years ago, but most freshly up-to-date training for those people who are in the air traffic control tower, overseeing processes, and most importantly, a capacity for the regulations to be enforced without fear, without favor. Now, you, sir, being legally trained and legally minded, may ask yourself, well, Minister, do these things not happen now? Do these things not already happen? If they were already happening, Mr. Speaker, sir, there'd be no reason for me to be here. And that they are not happening is the obvious source of concern of the government. Because, sir, we have to recognize that we want to take this country on a destination which allows for us to come best in class. Now, again, I want to be very candid with the country. There are those people, sir, who tend to speak a little bit glibly. Yeah. There are some people who speak a little bit glibly, sir, on the destination we want to get to. I think that everybody in the world realizes that the best rating an airport can get is to have Federal Aviation Authority Category 1 status. But we cannot come and have a serious conversation with this country about the journey to get from where we are to where we want to be and do it in a glib and imprecise manner. When I hear these things, sir, it tends to boil my blood. Because I believe, for all my faults, the one fault perhaps that I can't overcome is that I have a tendency, sir, to try to get to the root of the intellectual substance of what it is that I'm talking about. And I want to urge those who are interested in the civil aviation debate, sir, to recognize that there are a process of steps that the country has to take if we're going to move from the entrance to Parliament, sir, to the glorious post of where you sit, the throne that you sit on, Mr. Speaker, sir. There are a number of steps that must be taken to get you there. And where we cannot afford to go is to a point where we just make people believe that this is a quick fix done by the stroke of a pen. Not true. This piece of legislation will act as an empowering tool, but there is a whole host of things that must accompany us. And that is why I say we're on a national journey of transformation. Irrespective of which administration is in government, the country must be able to defend the integrity of the aerodrome, whether it be from a safety perspective, whether it be from the regulations that govern it, whether it be, Mr. Speaker, sir, from the security of the aerodrome perspective. There are a range of considerations. So the first thing, sir, that we got to deal with is to make sure that we have trained personnel. And I've made the point with respect, for example, to the air traffic controllers, but it has to be true of all the other personnel who perform essential functions with regard to aviation. There are dangerous goods that are transported into Barbados and out of Barbados all the time. Chemical products, etc., Mr. Speaker, sir. But you have to have them handled and managed within certain parameters and in a certain way. So therefore, the regulations that govern the management and carriage of dangerous goods, sir, must be up to date. Above and beyond that, therefore, we must train our people who will have responsibility to manage that so that they can be among the best in class at all times with respect to executing that function. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, the question of the ability to certify personnel. Because it isn't just about training. They must be able to be certified as having reached a certain standard. And that there is evidence of their certification so that you have records, sir, of what you were last trained in, where you were trained, how long you were trained, what level you reached, and when it is necessary for you to be retrained again. I've had, sir, in my previous capacity, conversations which concerned me, where you will have a difficulty in identifying the accuracy of the record of training of an individual who has been employed there for 10 years. And you ask yourself, well, how is this possible? Because you must have accurate records. And equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, the broader certification of the aerodrome with respect to considerations that I've itemized already. The need for the considerations of security and safety and air navigation services to be best in class. Those things, sir, we must be able to make sure that we continue to be able to certify. Now, I say this because I don't want people to get overly excited about the mention of a Category 1 status. Those who are inclined to read on this matter will remember that in 2015, not so long ago, Guyana walked this road. And Guyana created the Civil Aviation Authority in 2015, or they may have already had it, they may have just carried it to the point where we are going to now. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the feeling was that after that they could get Category 1 status, and nobody realized that, you know what, part of the problem is that you did not have your own flag carrier. And having your own flag carrier becomes a serious consideration in this process too. Now, that's why I said there is a journey that we have to take. That we may not have our own flag carriers, sir, today should not be a bar or an inhibition for us doing the heavy lifting now to get us to the point where we are certified as being as close to Category 1 as we can be. And that is the mission that we are on, and that is the message that I'm offering to you, sir, and through the country, by extension through the country. Our International Civil Aviation Organization is about setting standards and best practices. And once one's airport or aerodrome falls below the category of rated number 1 for a number of reasons. And I want you, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm going to go through the reasons of why you will fall below Category 1 status. I want you, sir, as I go through them, to reflect on the Barbados Airport and understand the magnitude and the enormity of the journey that we must go on. Because a country will fail, sir, to get to Category 1 status if the country's laws and regulations necessary to support certification and oversight in accordance with certain minimal standards are not in place. Sir, this country's most recent adjustment to the legislation impacting aviation in this country was in the year 2007. We are now in 2022. Do not invite me, sir, to believe that between 2007 and 2022, the world has not changed in terms of the level of standards required in international airports. Do not invite me to believe that, Mr. Speaker, sir. Because I know from all that I see with my naked eye that standards of security have tightened globally. Standards of safety and expectations related to safety have been raised globally, sir. But Barbados, relying as we are so heavily on a tourism product and on an international business product, both of which must utilize their aerodrome, Mr. Speaker, sir. We are basking in the complacency of a regulatory framework that goes back to 2007. The other consideration that will cause us to fail or fall below acceptable standards of ICAO, Mr. Speaker, God bless you, sir, is the fact that the Civil Aviation Authority lacks technical expertise and lacks resources. It lacks the organizational structure to license and oversee air carrier operations. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, if you do not have a Civil Aviation Authority, you cannot have a Civil Aviation Authority that has capacity to do any of these things. The first thing you've got to do is to have the authority. So what we have is a Civil Aviation Department, sir, that makes an effort. I have met virtually everybody who works in there. I know good people who try. But, sir, what they do not have, what they have not been given, and this is why I say I'm not going to be partisan political, sir, because this country must hear the truth, the unpleasant truth, that successive administrations have failed to treat to that department's requirements the need for them to have adequate personnel, staffing, and resources in a way that is mind-boggling, and it must be fixed. And you can't kick that can down the road forever. You do it at your own national peril, because that aerodrome, if it is not maintained in accordance with certain standards and best practice, recommended practices, will be negatively rated, and then none of that which you want to arrive, that feeds and fuels this nation, would be able to arrive here to feed or fuel us. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, again, that is the second reason why you will fall below the Category 1 status. The third reason, sir, is that the Civil Aviation Authority does not have adequately trained or qualified technical personnel. And again, that links very closely into what I said at number 2, because there are certain types of activity that we require people to conduct at the aerodrome, an airworthiness inspector, sir, is not going to be found. I used the example just now. You know, how many airworthiness inspectors you know, Mr. Speaker? I don't know that anybody here in this house can confidently say that they have met an airworthiness inspector. But we have to have them in plurality at the airport so as to ensure that in the event of, and certainly not even only in the event of emergency, but at all times, because emergency does not knock on your door and say, come in next week. You have to have them there available. The skill set must be accessible, not one man or two men, sir, but there must be the plurality of the skill set so as to be sure that in the event that you need, they are there. No, sir. The other consideration, sir, is the absence of adequate inspectorate generally to ensure the enforcement of and the compliance with minimal international standards. And among these things that we have to look at and we have to rectify are some basics. It troubled me, sir, it continues to trouble me, that we can be in a country where something as fundamental as maintaining documents. We live in an age of information technology. We should not be challenged with the maintenance of documents and records. Records of certification, sir, should not be a problem, but they are. Inadequate continuing oversight, surveillance of operations, sir. These are things that are too basic, but have not been reinvested in as being fundamental as we go forward in this journey. And so despite the glib talk that you will hear from time to time, I want folks to take the little bit of time, extra time you may have, and do a little bit of reading on the journey that you have to take to get from where you are, sir, to where we want to be. Because it requires a national will. It requires, in my judgment, sir, a political will, and I believe we are demonstrating that here today. But it requires, sir, a body of movement in Barbados. That the unions cannot exclude themselves from this process, because terms and conditions which were comfortable to the union in 1970, sir, may have to be looked at more critically in 2022, because we need to have the staff in the flexibility of position to do the things that are absolutely necessary and required for us to be best in class. And this has been an issue not just for a little island like Barbados, sir. If you recall, as far back as when Ronald Reagan was president, he had that discussion with the unions and the Lockhorns, and I think at one point he had to bring in the military to make sure that air navigation services were done at major airports in the United States of America. Ronald Reagan had to do that. I think Margaret Thatcher had a similar clash too. And part of it is breaking the mold of the traditional, because what we are talking about is an indispensable service. You can't find trained people easily to do these things, but it must be done within an environment, sir, where there's a spirit and a willingness of give and take in the broader national interest. It therefore means, sir, that by extension, the workers must also have that perspective. And I'm proud to say, and will say, that I've met some very good workers in the Civil Aviation Department in Barbados. Under-resourced, very often overworked, but very good people, and in need of the kind of support that we are trying to give them now. And obviously, sir, because much of this is at this point in the hands of personnel administration, or what is it called? What's the correct term? Personnel administration is no longer. Right. The Ministry of the Public Service and so on. We, Mr. Speaker, sir, come to the point of an authority which must have the ability to reach out there and contract and bring in those skills it needs with alacrity. Part of what we know of government and staffing, sir, is that you need staff, but then you're told you go wait. And you're told you need staff urgently, we understand that, but they ain't the money for that, they know, and so on. There ain't a post available, and so on. Mr. Speaker, sir, the authority must have the flexibility to do those things that the authority needs to do in the wider interest of national development and with urgency and expedition. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel that it is also good to speak to those people who have had successes. As I pointed out, Guyana had to take this journey The Bahamas have taken this journey. Many countries around the world practice the full separation model. The United Kingdom does it. Ghana does it. Sir, New Zealand does it. Australia does it. There are a range of them. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the Caribbean, we have had previous experiences where there have been states and sister CARICOM states who have had to take this journey. The Bahamas, sir, went through a process where they were audited by ICAO and were proven to be abysmal failures. Abysmal failures. And they did the necessary heavy lifting to get them to a point now where they're among the most credible in the hemisphere. It is not beyond us, sir. But as I start to talk that type of language, I therefore, sir, have to speak a little bit about what the assessments are, because ICAO utilizes an assessment process, and I have hinted that, but I'm sure that if you're following me closely, Mr. Speaker, sir, a man with your breadth of intellect would want to ask me the question, well, what then, Senior Minister, Honourable Member for St. James Central, give me some specifics about what you're talking about. So this is where the rubber has to hit the road. And this is where, sir, we have to have the serious conversation with the country. Because ICAO utilizes an assessment development system. Not assessment only, but also will work with you continuously to look at your development, to hold your hand and carry you from where you are to where you want to be. It is like an alcoholic, Mr. Speaker. The first thing you got to do if you want to get out of being an alcoholic is to accept that you are an alcoholic, accept that you are imperiled by that state, and that you want the help. So the first thing Barbados had to do was to look at its history with the ICAO audits and say, but wait, this really can't continue to work. We realize that the slope we are on is a slippery and sliding slope, and that there is a need for us to reach out in all intellectual humility and say, Skipper, what you could do here to help us get out of this, because the country is going to suffer if we don't reach out in humility. And that's what the government of Barbados did, Mr. Speaker, sir. What should have happened a long time ago, Mr. Speaker, sir. But as I say, it has fallen to the shoulders of this administration to do those things which are which had not only been undone, but which had come to the point of being unpleasant because they were not undone, because they were undone. Now, the ICAO system is called the Universal Safety Oversight Program. Universal Safety Oversight. And that program, Mr. Speaker, sir, focuses on an assessment of whether states around the world have implemented what they call critical elements, indispensable elements for safety oversight systems. In a simple form of language, sir, you want to make sure that those things that are seen as indispensable parts of safety are being done, and that the measures that are being recommended to be put in place to ensure that safety safety and security are being appropriately looked after at any given aerodrome in any country, that those measures are being put in place effectively, and more importantly, Mr. Speaker, sir, that they're maintained in place consistently. Now, sir, to pass the assessment, they will come into the country, and they're going to look at your standards and the recommended practices that they have, and see whether the standards that you are applying meet or match with what they expect. It's an international level of assessment. So the standard that you expect, sir, will follow consistently across the board. And the recommended practices, sir, that they're urging the country to put in place, are you putting those practices, or have you taken the trouble, the political will, to put the practice in place? And that, sir, has been where this country has failed itself, and by extension, its people. Because prior to now, what we had not been doing was paying attention. Is like a child who is unruly in class. I hope there are none of them in my eyesight, sir. But an unruly little boy in class whose teacher tells him, stop doing that, stop fidgeting around and pay attention. And he don't hear, sir, gonna get himself in trouble.
Sound familiar?
It sounds familiar. And those, sir, who pay attention and do what they're supposed to do will get through better. So we were in that class, sir. We were in that class or part of that class, where we were being a little unruly and not paying attention. My friend to my right, sir, is heckling me. And I would like him to stop heckling me.
Only remember paying no attention to him.
So,
Which one was each of us?
I don't feel that I should say on the floor of the house that your member was unruly when he was at school, sir. I don't feel I should say that. But in life there's hope, so he came up for the better. But Mr. Speaker, sir, the point is this. There are certain critical elements, therefore, that they have laid out. Now, it's important for the country to understand what these critical elements are. Because if we're going to fix this, we have to have a national will as a people in Barbados to put the Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party and all the others one side. And let us have serious conversation as a serious people in a serious country about very, very serious problems. Critical element number one, Mr. Speaker, sir, turns to the question of a comprehensive body of aviation law. Now, what do we practice? I just indicated to you, sir, that our regulatory framework, sir, last adjustment was in 2007. And even then, sir, there are deficiencies. That law we have, to some extent, it is enforced. But there's also not law. There's in many cases custom. And what are some of the customs that we have, Mr. Speaker, sir? We know that there has to be oversight in terms of security of access to the ramp. And I like that one as a good example because I think everybody in here knows where to find the cargo bond up at the airport. I believe that every member of this house knows where to find the cargo bond at the airport, sir. And certainly I believe vast majority of Barbadians know what the cargo bond looks like. And you show up at the door of the cargo bond and you look from the side where you are, where you come the land side, right across, and you see the runway. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I am sure that if you've been up there, you have seen people who are ordinary citizens, not on the land side in the car park, or waiting outside the door, but inside the cargo bond itself, getting their little parcel or package, walking about inside the cargo bond. And the runway is right next to them. And there is nothing to obstruct access to that runway. Then a fence, then nothing there. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is part of the custom that has evolved. Well, it's good, it's all right, we good. A man shows up, you know who I am. He used to work in the cargo bond 4 years ago. He's a friend. Now he come in. Let him walk about freely. Can be trusted. He's the brother of a man who works at the cargo bond. He can come in. He can be trusted, walk about freely. The flexibilities that we have built in or chosen to build into a system on the basis of custom evolving over time. A custom, sir, a practice evolving peacefully, openly, as of right. Nec vim, nec clam, nec precario, Mr. Speaker, sir, but wrong in so many ways. That's what we got to fix. The question, Mr. Speaker, sir, of access to the ramp, access to cargo facilities, access, Mr. Speaker, sir, to so many other security areas of the aerodrome. Not many aerodromes in the world will have a training school that is so precariously close to hangars and ease of fluidity of movement between the training school and the hangar. That you can walk literally, as I have done, Mr. Speaker, sir, from one to the other. In more recent times, I believe there's a fencing that is there now. But it wasn't always that either. And so, sir, the question, therefore, becomes the effectiveness of our aviation regulations and law, the ability to enforce it, and to have a comprehensive body of regulations. I think that I've used examples that allow people to see in their mind's eye the challenge that we're talking about. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, it isn't only there. It is also the ease with which some vehicles find themselves on the ramp itself. But that happens. There are some private vehicles that can find their way, depending on who's driving the private vehicle, onto the airport ramp itself. And there has to be, therefore, a regimented approach to bringing that practice and similar practices to a halt. And I don't want to make this seem to be too big an issue, but the truth of the matter is, sir, that private sector Barbados obviously has invested, as we want them to, in the areas of the airport, in the areas close to the airport. But that also has to be a matter that is carefully regulated and policed, because it is pregnant with possibilities that could prove to be unfortunate in the interests of this country. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, closely aligned to the question of comprehensive aviation law must also therefore follow the regulations that are subsidiary regulation to the body of the primary legislation, supporting the primary legislation to make sure that we have standardized operations procedures. That, again, this devilish word that this country does not like to embrace, that there are standards, fortified, impregnable, unbreachable standards of process, standards of service, standards of equipment that do not now exist, sir. Or if they exist, they are flexibly and selectively applied depending on who they're being applied to. So that if the PS of tourism and international transport show up without her badge, my is the PS. Not that this PS would do that, but it could happen. And someone will feel constrained to say, man, that's the PS, let she come in. No. It begs the question, should we do better? I think we must. Because if you apply it to the PS, you may feel constrained to apply it to the deputy. If you apply it to the deputy, you may feel constrained to apply it a little further down the line. Where is the seller? Where is the bottom line? Where is it bottom out, sir? And that selectivity of application to standardized processes and procedures at the aerodrome, which is a national security facility, is a matter of concern to the International Civil Aviation Organization. No, nobody can fix that but us, sir. They could come down here and they could preach like Peter and pray like Paul. They cannot rectify it for us. They can only make recommendations. We have to be prepared to change that which is within our grasp. We failed to have made the adjustments for decades, sir. The time is now ripe that we correct mistakes of the past. Takes us to the establishment of independent regulatory authority, which is the next critical element. Because the only way you're going to be able to enforce this is if you have that independent, almost like how a judge, sir, like how the justice system, those who sit at the top of the justice system are independent. And a very good example of that is before the country today. That the justice system must act independently, that powers are separated, and that the politician, the parliamentarian, sir, is as amenable to law as anybody else in the country. That there must be a standardized process. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there has to be a regulatory authority with adequate resources, adequate staffing, in order to make sure that that standardized process is finally implemented in Barbados. And that we can therefore have an autonomous body that doesn't answer to the whim and fancy of those of us in here, but answers specifically to the well-being of the nation's aerodrome. Now, you don't often hear ministers in government saying that the body should answer specifically to them on what they want. But I have to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the age that we live in. And this is the Barbados that we must build out. We must build out a Barbados for these young people, Mr. Speaker, who are here today, and their brothers and sisters and their friends, in which there is a consistency across the board in terms of treatment of people, and that it does not vary depending on the whim and fancy of any particular office holder in this country, whosoever he or she may be. And if you have such a regulatory authority at the airport, it enables you then to apply critical element number 4, which is the critical element that allows or provides for what you call it technical technical, Mr. Speaker, qualifications and training. And, sir, one of the problems that we have been facing at the airport for a long time is the fact that we are short of the, not just staff, but the technical training of staff and ensuring that their standard of qualification is constantly refreshed. It is an unhappy practice. And I don't want this country to feel now that I'm just talking about Grantley Adams Airport. If we are going to be a competitive economy, if we are going to have a society characterized by growth, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are some things that we have started to do, practice doing, that we got to stop doing because they are not helpful. I come from a profession, Mr. Speaker, sir, which is distinctly different to the profession of the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, where there must be an element of training and refresher courses taken for you to be able to continue to practice. Continuing education is part of that profession. It is not part of the legal profession, sir. My license to practice law, if I went back to practice law tomorrow, is not contingent on continuous education. And that is true of several other areas of activity in Barbados. But yet we expect people who are not urged, persuaded, massaged to the point where they have continuous education to be able to offer the best quality of service. But how is that possible? You are wishing on a star because everybody is not going to put themselves to the trouble to read what is current and what is new. Some people will be doing that which they did 10 years ago, though requirements have taken them to a point or taken their business area to a point that changed 5-6 years ago, and you ain't even catch up with what happened 5 years ago yet. No, sir. That is really where we have to be. And it is not the easiest of conversations to have with this country because nobody likes to be shaken out of the rut and told you've got to do things differently. But the standard of service that we rely on, if we are going to be able to be competitive and get goods across borders, services across borders, foreign exchange inflows, those fundamentals, Mr. Speaker, sir, are inextricably linked to some of these types of conversation. And Mr. Speaker, sir, then as you come into the specifics of the critical element, what you must do, these are not, in my judgment, recommendations only. These are must-do recommendations. Technical guidance materials must be in the hands of the Civil Aviation Authority. The newest, most current technical guidance manuals, safety, critical equipment, Mr. Speaker, sir, must be available to facilitate safety oversight. You have to have documented processes and procedures to ensure that personnel and that organizations meet established requirements. That in itself is another critical element, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I could go on. There are only 8 of them. I think the last 2, sir, are the need to document your processes. And again, that brings us back to the question of standards. That at the airport, there must be processes which are documented for everything. Quality assurance, airworthiness of aircraft, I must document the processes that I follow if I'm going to certify this aircraft as being airworthy. If an event takes place and I have certified it as being airworthy, I am liable if I fail to follow the correct documented processes and procedures. Do we hold people to that standard? No. And that is where the concern is, Mr. Speaker. That we must have a proactive approach, not just that we wait on audits and say, oh Lord, Kadir, the mark is too hard. Oh my God, though. They could have easily. We have to have proactive approaches so that before the audit comes, we hold our own feet to the fire. And we say, look, in the event of an audit, is this in place? Have we ticked that box? Have we checked the next box? Have we consistently been monitoring performances in order to make sure that the standard of that which we do, whether it is security, whether it is safety, whether it is aircraft worthiness, whether it is handling dangerous goods, whatever it is, that those things are being constantly done in accordance with the best practices. Do we do that? Pardon? Compliance audits and quality assurance. Do we do that? Answer, unfortunately, no. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, these are the things that have taken us to the point where we have had to go with intellectual humility to the International Civil Aviation Organization with a view to seeking assistance. Now, I am sure by now that all honorable members will want to know exactly where Barbados stands, because it would have been easy for you to have concluded that our performance has not been the best. And I am sure that I will be invited to condescend to specifics. Where are we? How have we performed? And in thinking this through, Mr. Speaker, sir, because I am going to be very mindful of the need for us not to unsettle the international community, nor am I going to forget the importance of national security considerations, nor do I want at any stage to be interpreted as casting blame in one political camp or the other, because I believe that all governments, bar none, have been guilty of moving too slowly on this matter or too ineffectively in this regard. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm going to say to this House that the Universal Safety Oversight audit was conducted in February of 2009. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, that there was a change of administration in 2007. So to be fair to that administration, bulk of that which they came and found would still be in place, because the previous administration was in government for 3 terms. So let us look at what happened in 2009, because it will reflect on a previous Labour Party administration. And Mr. Speaker, sir, personnel licensing assessments were done, airworthiness of aircraft assessments were done, flight operations air assessments were done, air navigation services assessments were done, Mr. Speaker, sir, aerodrome operations safety assessments were done, aircraft incident accident investigation, capacity was assessed. 405 protocols, sir, were deemed to be unsatisfactory. And the implementation of the 8 critical elements, when assessed across the board, placed Barbados' performance at 51%. The ICAO deems 80% to be acceptable. Anything below 80%, unacceptable. So in 2009, we were measured, or as they would say in the scripture, sir, we were placed in the scales and we were found wanting. 51% performance compliance, 80% is what you would consider to be acceptable. Now, it tells you that there's an institutional weakness, a regulatory deficiency at the aerodrome. And I've used a period of time that would have reflected largely on the Labour Party administration, because I want the chatter of idle political tongues now to be still and let us now have 1,000 thoughts contending. Because if I am being political, I tell you what happened in the Labour Party administration. I go now deep into the administration that was led by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, as he then was. I think that was an assessment done in 2012 or 2011. Federal Aviation Authority, this is the United States. And their findings, sir, and this is under a different administration now, their findings, sir, were that there's a lack of timely amendment to regulations and legislation in Barbados, a chronic understaffing in areas critical to safety and oversight, lack of qualified personnel on the aerodrome, limited capacity to license and certify airlines, a complete absence of capacity to certify the aerodrome, absence of capacity to certify air operators, absence of capacity with respect to aviation training organization, absence of capacity with respect to aircraft maintenance, absence of a capacity for approval of repairs to aircraft, activities with relation to carriage of dangerous goods, absence of capacity, effective surveillance of air navigation services, weak, licensing of flight crew and flight dispatching, absence of capacity to certify cabin safety inspections on passenger carrying aircraft. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, if you are a Barbadian, there comes a time, I want to urge, that we put the foolishness of the partisan politics one side and look at where the country is. And I've given an example, sir, in the immediate tail end of a 3-year administration of the Labour Party. And I, sir, was part of the last 5 years of that. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I've given an example in the middle of the administration, 5 years into the administration of the last government, sir. And these are the findings of 2 major standards assessment bodies in civil aviation. And in these findings, there's absolutely nothing that we can be proud about. And I urge the country to recognize that, therefore, this journey that we must now go on is one in which we have to realize that the Grant Lee Adams International Aeroport and Aerodrome is too fundamental an economic artery to the development of this country for it to be continued to be treated in a derelict and negligent way, and equally, sir, for it not to be utilized to achieve the maximum economic opportunity that it can deliver to the people of this country. It should be an artery of economic development. It should be an artery of further diversification of economic activity in this country. It should, Mr. Speaker, sir, be a facilitator of broader base of employment. And these things, sir, cannot happen if you are being so negatively rated by the Federal Aviation Authority back in 2011 or International Civil Aviation Organization back in 2009. And by doing it this way, I hope that I have made the point that will be made or that can be made to the satisfaction of everyone in any political camp in Barbados. That larger than us, larger than our philosophies, larger than our politics, there's a place called Barbados. And we can't allow the one entry, the one aeronautical port of entry to be red flagged. Now, what we are told, basically, by these audits, and I have deliberately gone no further, because, as I said, I do not want to trespass in any way near issues that currently impact national security. But what we have been told by these audits is that all 8 critical elements identified by the International Civil Aviation Organization are in a zone of unsatisfactory performance. All 8 critical elements identified by ICAO are in a zone of unsatisfactory performance. And that the heavy lifting, and sir, I became International Transport Minister in 2018. And we put arrangements in place, sir, administratively, to try to start now to right-size this ship and to start to put in place a number of measures. In fact, today is the culmination of those measures because they were leading us to the point where we had to have legislation. And remember, I start with saying you have to have a comprehensive body of legislation, and you begin with the creation of your Civil Aviation Authority. And one of the reasons why we are here, sir, is because that don't happen overnight, but it has, sir, to be done. It is an indispensable part of correcting the problems that I have identified. The state, sir, has to be able, if we're going to satisfy the Federal Aviation Authority or the International Civil Aviation Organization, the state has to be able to demonstrate oversight, Mr. Speaker, oversight capacity to ensure effective implementation of the safety regulations. Now, we therefore signed an agreement with ICAO at the 41st General Assembly in order to get technical assistance for this country. You have to humble yourself sometimes, Mr. Speaker, and realize that you're on a path of error and that you've got to get help to fix it. So we went into an arrangement with ICAO to get the benefit of technical assistance, sir, that will help us come to the point where we can have air operator certification Air Maintenance Organization certification, aerodrome certification, and the development of the necessary regulations and manuals that allow for us to build out a proper aviation regime and a proper aviation industry. And it is on that point, sir, that I want to pause and ask this House to reflect on the opportunities that are before us. Imagine, if you will, Mr. Speaker, a Barbados in which a plane does not just land here, but it lands here and there is a recognition that there's a need for an engine to be overhauled. So you park it in a hangar and you strip the engine down and you overhaul the engine. On something the size of a Liat, the Liat planes that used to fly in here, Mr. Speaker, so I can't even remember the designation of the aircraft, -8. A process like that, sir, easily will bring in $50,000 to $100,000. Simple process like that, US currency. Can you imagine what it would be, sir, on a Virgin Atlantic jet? And you want to have that type of service. You want a plane that lands here, Mr. Speaker, sir, and there's a need for them to retrofit the cabin or whatever, and you have the services here to provide that. And in each of these opportunities, there are Barbadians, men and women being deployed to work so that there's an economic base of activity being spawned at the airport that could do these things now if only we had had the prescience and foresight to put the country in a place to deliver that service. Now, I leave it for the people who are in academia to tell me whether that is economic diversification, to tell me whether that is putting the country on a growth trajectory, to tell me whatever it is. I know that unless we do it, we cannot put the people in my constituency in a position where they could get jobs that otherwise they would not have. We can't put the people in Christchurch East in a position where they can get jobs that otherwise they could not have. We can't put those thousands that are coming out of school every day with technical inclinations and a technical bent, Mr. Speaker, sir, to work in an area that is exciting. Every young man who is technically inclined, sir, if he's pulling down an aircraft engine, do you really think, Mr. Speaker, sir, he ain't going to be interested in being part of that if he could? But this is where we have failed our people, and where we cannot continue to fail, Mr. Speaker, sir. So that the issue, sir, before us is a very simple one, that we want to create a standalone authority which will offer safety, security, regulatory functions and services as one unit, air navigation services as a separate unit, and aircraft accident investigation, sir, as a third unit. And as we are doing a cognate debate, there's going to be an air navigation bill, and that provides for the establishment of an independent office for the provision of establishment of air navigation services. And that will enable better management of the navigational airspace. Why do we need to better manage our navigational airspace? I am mindful, sir, that I have been assigned a role ministerially that begins from tomorrow. So let me not begin by being unkind to neighbors. But the truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, so that Barbados got to start taking itself a little bit more seriously in some things. Back in the 1950s, going into 60s, when the colonial period was coming to an end, the British government had a structure in place where navigation services were assigned to PRCO, Trinidad. And it was felt then that was a comfortable location to put them, and Trinidad was the place that the British said can run this operation of navigation services. From then till now, Trinidad has maintained control of the upper airspace in this region. So by the time you pass Puerto Rico, Mr. Speaker, sir, the upper airspace, and if I remember correctly, it is somewhere around above 24,000 feet. That upper airspace is controlled by the PRCO Flight Information Zone. I can say these things to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, because I did not just go and sit down and prop up my foot on the desk. I intimately involved my hands in the process as being the minister to try to grapple with the challenges. Never heard in this house for, how long I've been in here now? 20 years, sir, in this parliament, that these things are a potential humbug to Barbados, but the house must hear it now. Because Trinidad controls that flight information zone. But you don't just pass through the flight information zone, you know, Mr. Speaker. Those services, those air navigation services, include advising the captain of the aircraft on the meteorology, the weather-related issues, advising the captain of the aircraft on air traffic in the area, advising the captain of the aircraft on a variety of things. And those services are paid for in hard currency. But I do not know or understand the post-colonial arrangement that allows for the Eastern Caribbean, and by extension Barbados, and I believe into the French Antilles, to continue to be reliant on the PRCO flight information zone. But this is what we do. And these are conversations, sir, which we're going to have as we unfold. They don't have to be disputatious. They don't have to be combative conversations. But they are part of the developmental dialogue that must take place among friendly states. Because show me the clause in Adam's will, which says that the PRCO flight information zone must be perpetually relied upon by all of us above 24,000 feet, and that the money that is hauled in by every aircraft flying through that zone, and countless aircraft go to the Eastern Caribbean, countless landings every day in Barbados, countless landings, Mr. Speaker, sir, and then there are those who fly through on their way to Brazil and Latin America, passing through the same flight information zone. And you can tell me, sir, that all of this, but are flying over our airspace too. There must be some dialogue that has got to be had and should have been had by now on these matters. And again, this is why we have to have an independent authority charged with the responsibility of shaping its way and carrying the country in a direction of civil aviation development that will engage and say, but look, hang on here. This cannot possibly be right. Certainly it doesn't appear at first blush to be fair. So we got to sit down and have a dialogue on this, because a lot of revenue is to be earned, but it can be so disproportionate in nature that all the revenue goes one place and then goes elsewhere. Uncomfortable conversations, but conversations that we must have if we are going to seriously speak to the development of the aviation industry. I want, Mr. Speaker, sir, to share with this House the view of the government that this is an opportunity for us to develop an ecosystem of activity and revenue income that never existed before. Not only by way, as I said, of the maintenance, repair, organization, and operations, but also, Mr. Speaker, sir, flight training. Do you know, sir, that there are people who fly in regional aircraft that leave this region and go all to Florida, spend hotel nights in Florida, buy food in Florida, buy clothing in Florida, to fly all the way back down to here, sir, in order to be trained in a simulator machine, a flight simulator, that could be located right here in Barbados. Trained and certified in a simulator that could be located right here in Barbados with a certifying officer present doing exactly what is done in Florida. But we prefer to support the United States economy because we good. And we ain't got to put ourselves out to try to get better because we good. And that is the complacency that inherited. And this way, ain't about party politics, is about a national mindset that has to change. Don't tell me, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it don't happen. It happens, and people go, and for that training will pay, sir, thousands of dollars. Not just 5,000 or 10,000 neither. in order to get that certification. And then you have a host of pilots across this region who are doing this. Ask yourself, Mr. Speaker, sir, why it cannot be done better and differently. And in a real sense, this is the kind of conversation now that we've kicked the can down the road, we buried that sweep that under the carpet, we ain't had time for it. It is not a sexy topic, but it is a necessary topic because it is a topic that enables us to better understand how this country can earn more money, how this country can fill more jobs, how this country can provide more opportunity, how this country can climb the ranks of international significance and be more relevant as a player and not just be a taker of that which is thrust upon us. So yes, when I discovered the information with regard to the arrangements that this region continues to perpetuate as an aftermath of an old colonial imposition by Great Britain, that they decide is not, like, you know, you divide the world in two. It was King Henry. There one side for Portugal and Spain. It wasn't Henry, it was, yeah. Treaty of, can't remember the treaty, no, it wasn't Tordesillas. Anyhow, but you divide the world in two. One side for you, one side for me. So Britain decide, well, this is where flight information zone going to be in PR code. And so be it. And we, 50, 60 years later, still rolling along merrily. But I don't feel that makes sense, sir. And the other thing that we have to do is to come to terms with this issue of accident investigation. Now, again, sir, it beggars belief that, according to my recollection, it would have been around and about the month of October in the year 1976, which is about 45 years ago, sir, 46 years ago, that we would have had a Cubana air disaster here. And subsequent to that, I know for a fact that there was a plane that went down in water off of Barbados. A few passengers were on board. The pilot, a very good friend of mine from my boyhood days, Mr. Kevin Springer, he managed to swim back to shore, and got assistance, or swim back. I was met close to the shore by ships. And what could have been a terrible situation was salvaged. And then there was another plane, and I remember this very well, went down in a field very close to the Grantley Adams International Airport, a light aircraft where there were two young men on board the aircraft, and one of them was a pilot who was practicing his landing and taking off. An engine failed, and that plane went down in a field right next to the airport. I remember it well, sir. It was a Saturday evening, around 6 p.m. Why do I recall with that distinction, sir? Because the other young man on the in that aircraft was my brother. Yeah? A life-changing experience for him, because at no time prior to that did I think he was going to become a priest. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that despite these experiences, this is where I said the country has to be prepared to have serious conversations. Despite these experiences, we in Barbados do not have an aircraft accident investigation unit. We treat to aircraft accidents or aircraft incidents like how we treat to hurricanes. God is a Bajan. Ain't gonna happen here. We treat to it, Mr. Speaker, sir, as though there is an inevitability that we will always be spared. But that, sir, in my respectful submission, does not make a lot of sense. So that, again, we are creating legal constructs. Part of that which will be created, and I believe it will be housed in the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport now, will be an aircraft accident investigation unit. And there has to be the development of a legislative framework to develop accident investigation capacity. Or even if we don't have the accident investigation capacity, because it's a small island, you can't do everything, but you must have that regulatory framework and construct within which you can delegate the conduct of the accident investigation to another state or to another organization which will have the capacity to help you do what you want to do. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, and again, I'm talking here now largely from memory, that this is the type of journey that the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport is now taking Barbados on. And I want to say, sir, that I commend this legislation to the House because of the very good reason that there's an idea whose time has come. We have tried for a long time, sir, to make some of these things, to treat to some of these things as though they are not significant. I do not think, sir, that we can continue to risk as a country the practice continuing of us not recognizing the fundamental importance of all the things I've talked about today. I take a certain degree of pride, Mr. Speaker, sir, in being able to pilot this bill because I think that it would be true to say that there is no point in the history of this place that we have had an engagement between the floor of the Parliament and the Speaker's throne on a matter as fundamental to civil aviation as this is. And so therefore, sir, that is a point of note. But even larger than that, sir, is the fundamental importance as an artery of economic development in Barbados. This bill, Mr. Speaker, or these bills, place the country on a footing where we can further develop opportunities that we've let go of begging to our detriment for far too long. A tourism-dependent country, sir, must see immediately the marriage between the use of its airport and the wider aerodrome services that it can provide, sir, and success of the tourism industry. That you are able not only to attract aircraft, but that you can maintain and service them. You're not only attracting aircraft, but you're training people to license and operate and to fly, and cabin crews being certified, and all those supporting things, sir, that have to be done. That could be done by us, but we let other people do it for us. Other people are paid, Mr. Speaker, sir, to do services to keep the Barbados tourism industry going that we could provide for ourselves. Now, I do not know of anywhere that would make sense, and I don't think I have to beg that point any further. I think that what I have said, sir, should be fairly straightforward. So as I said, Mr. Speaker, I ain't come here to have a big lot of political talk. I come here to have a straight talk with the nation of Barbados through you. I know that it is going to be a journey that will require, at some points, the fullest cooperation of the trade union movement. I know it is a journey that will require, at some points, the cooperation of workers in Barbados. I want to urge especially the workers to realize that this helps fortify them and give them more opportunity than they've had before. I know, Mr. Speaker, that this is a journey that will require us to have a change in our national mindset and to accept that there are some things in this country which have to be off limits, which have to be strictly controlled and prohibited. And it is not just a casual free-for-all in everything that you show up and you say, my partner, I want to get in here. Partner, I want to do that. My friend, you know who I am. We know all the prefixes to the conversation, sir. We know them. My brother, I want to get in here and do that. I got a little something here I got to do. It can't work so. And the new construct will prohibit that. But more important than all of this, Mr. Speaker, sir, it puts us on a footing of sustainability, on a footing of growth, on a footing of competitiveness. And it is for those reasons that I commend this bill to this House. I'm obliged. Beg to second that, sir.
Beg to move it.
Sorry.
Bill be ready.
Beg to move the bill be read the second time, sir.
Honourable Member St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this Civil Aviation Bill 2022. And, Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I wish to acknowledge that those students who were sitting in the gallery are actually bordering my constituency. and therefore I welcome them this morning. It gives me tremendous pride to be speaking in this honorable chamber with the teachers and students who are supposed to be visiting us today. But Mr. Speaker, I get back to the bill we are debating this morning in this honorable chamber. And to say, first of all, at the outset, that when I peruse the document that is before me, which deals with ICAO certification, I am particularly disappointed in the fact that since 2009, under the previous Democratic Labour Party administration, ICAO findings indicated that we were below the 80% mark, and that we will find ourselves in the year of our Lord 2022 having a conversation that should have taken place immediately following that audit. And that I add further to my disappointment that we as a nation would continue to rely on the services of our brothers and sisters in Trinidad and Tobago to carry out for us a function in aviation that Barbados really ought to have had in place many decades ago. I do recall in our existence, we had an airline called Caribbean Airways, and therefore I believe we were duty-bound then, sir, to make sure that we met the requirements of an ICAO audit in order for us to be able to be considered a Category 1 airport facility. But Mr. Speaker, I am even more disappointed when I recall, sir, that in many debates taking place in this honorable chamber, many excuses were given for not pursuing in a timely manner the accreditation that is required for Category 1. And I recall distinctly, sir, that it was even intimated that Barbados does not have to become a Category 1 because people felt comfortable where they were and not preparing to stretch themselves beyond where they were in order to make us world class. That, sir, is a major disappointment for me. Whenever I travel the world to represent Barbados, I treat to Barbados as world class. Barbados has demonstrated in more than one area that we are world class. Rihanna is an example. Barbados has demonstrated in sports that we are world class. Sir Gary Sobers is our example. Barbados has demonstrated in more than one way that we are world class every time our Prime Minister speaks internationally. Sir, you would understand my disappointment and the great hurt that I feel, sir, when you look at an audit that took place in 2009 and an entire government failed to address the issues required to make us a Category 1 airport. It is shameful, sir. And it's one of the things that I hope that when Barbadians are called upon in the future to address this nation's governance structure and who should govern this country, that they remember these failings. Because for us to forget that these things actually took place in this very nation, where people are now rising up and pushing up their heads and behaving as though this is a turn for them to come back to do us further harm. Mr. Speaker, sir, it cannot be right. And we cannot at all forget that at each and every stage when we were called upon to make Barbados right and to do the simple things, sir, that were required to make sure that we can stand up and say, yes, we are accustomed to excellence, and so we can deliver, we fail, sir. Critical element 1, primary aviation legislation, sir. That cannot be a major problem. You have more than enough jurisdictions that you can refer to if you were lost and had no idea what to do. And so therefore I am tremendously disappointed that a Minister of Tourism and International Transport, sir, would look at an audit report and fail to address something as simple as primary aviation legislation, sir. And then if that wasn't worse, if that wasn't bad enough, sir, civil aviation regulations with legislation, sir, you know better than I do, regulations invariably follow. And that if you do not have a management structure, legislation on its own, sir, sometimes can create major challenges. And therefore, regulations are important in order for us to manage. Civil Aviation Authority and Oversight Function, how did we ever do this? That we existed for so long without an oversight body to manage what is happening at our airport. And like the senior minister who spoke and piloted this bill correctly said, you are actually auditing yourself. You are actually being your own oversight body. Sir, this is something that Barbados should never, never, ever find itself doing to its people ever again. And I make these points, sir, because I recognize that we have tremendous amounts of opportunities before us in terms of the development of an airport and in reaching a Category 1 designation. And I'm saying this, sir, because given my past experience, and I've stayed away from speaking about aviation and tourism matters for the past 4 years, because I have been so consumed by my new calling, the excitement there, sir, is such that I have not found the space physically or mentally to be able to be drawn into matters of tourism and international transport, because I'm still living the excitement of agriculture. But sir, I say to you that it wouldn't take me long to dust off my brain and remove the rust to get back to the things that I spoke about when I saw champion Barbados' cause in the travel trade. And I do remind this honorable chamber that I have had the good fortune of serving in Delhi, in India, as part of the United Federation of Travel Agents and Tourism Affiliates Association, and that I have also had a seat as the regional representative on the International Air Transportation Authority, IATA, Joint Executive Council. So that, sir, if I am disappointed and feel a certain level of embarrassment that Barbados has failed to reach Category 1 after having a report that stated exactly what is required, and that our failing was so abysmal that it did not even motivate then a government or a minister to take the necessary action, you start to understand why we ended up the way we ended up, and we had what is called a lost decade. Frankly, sir, I believe everybody there and then were completely lost about what they were doing, because I don't understand, sir, how we could have missed this one. Now, Mr. Speaker, you have an opportunity for people to find employment in aviation. When I sit in my constituency office on Wednesdays, I go through a number of people who come there seeking employment. It has reached the point where sometimes I believe that one can consider it to be hopeless with the amount of people who are asking for employment instantly, but we cannot deliver it for them simply because we do not have the capacity to do it. And really and truly, our hardcore reality is that we are still functioning in a post-COVID construct where all the things that we had prior to COVID were pushed back, and therefore we are still in a recovery mode. Jobs created in tourism industry, jobs created in manufacturing, jobs created in construction. Jobs generally are a problem. And that if we were conscious enough, sir, to be able to move with alacrity then to bring this legislation, an expanded Grantley Adams International Airport would have been one area where we certainly would have construction work going on up to now, and where we certainly would have been able to provide opportunities for people to participate and find employment. And I'm going to break this down, sir, because sometimes we need to break these things down in order for people to get a good sense of what you're trying to explain, rather than see what you're saying as a criticism of those who have been before us, or equally playing politics with matters that are deemed to be of extreme importance in a country's development. And Mr. Speaker, if any of us have a conscience, and we were to drive past Grantley Adams Airport, the potential that we see for our development over there to bring us in line with what others have done, and I'm going to mention some of the others as well, we will start to feel as though we have absolutely no national pride. Because I cannot understand if Grantley Adams Airport borders my constituency, these young men and women would from time to time pass Grantley Adams Airport. Some of them live in my constituency, I'm sure. And we feel a sense of pride of what we do in this country. But when you could see an airport, sir, that is begging for development, with all the potential that exists there, and the Honourable member for St. James Central was correct when he mentioned that airports now are constructed like malls, so that people will have an experience passing through an airport, sir, and at the same time provide an opportunity for entrepreneurship within the airports. And what we have, we are barely skimming the surface, sir. I have had the good fortune of traveling the world. And I can tell you there are some times when, as a businessman, you have to travel. You get into an airport, you get out of your bed, sometimes 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. You rush to an airport. You want to be comfortable. And if you do not have access, sir, to one of the lounges at the airport, invariably you're stuck in a communal space with the rest of the passengers who are also, like you, looking for comfort and therefore access to dining facilities, sir. Some place where you can sit down and go over your notes. Some place where you can sit down, have a coffee, have a tea, have some breakfast, like breakfast, sir. Those facilities are required in all airports. And Mr. Speaker, I think the opportunity is there for Barbados to reach this point where we have those services operating in a 24 hours environment, so that our airport then can be deemed among the top ones on this side of the world. And Mr. Speaker, you know, I make reference to Dubai all the time, because Dubai was created out of what people consider to be, first of all, an impossible ask. As a matter of fact, here in Barbados, we would have said, "You man mad." That's a fact. But what he saw was an opportunity to develop a country, given the fact that he was not prepared to be one-dimensional. And with all the oil in the world, he felt that he needed to go in a different direction, sir, in order to get the best bang for his buck, but to position that country in such a place where it stands second to none. That airport, sir, when developed to where it is now, sir, stands to be the #1 international passenger airport in the world, beating Heathrow, which held that record for many, many decades, sir. And Dubai's example should be one that we should all research, simply because you start to understand how that which you think was so impossible is actually possible. And I do not see in any way, shape, or form, sir, anything that is required to make Grantley Adams International Airport world-class, Category 1, can be nearly as challenging as what Dubai was asked to deliver. And that you can bring an airport, sir, that has now seen in 2021 29 million passengers. So when they started, nobody ain't hear nothing about Dubai. Nobody don't want to know anything about Dubai. They created, sir, a space where engineering and innovation is such that it would tantalize the mind to see what they have been able to deliver. You're driving, sir, and passing through a space where you end up on an island called Palm Island through a tunnel that runs on the water, and you are in a completely different space, created out in the ocean, sir. And that because of that type of development, an airport then can be transformed into the global type of facility that you can now pull some 29 million passengers through that airport in the year 2021. And sir, I submit to you that this is a 66% drop below what it was in 2019. When I talk about potential and being bold and being willing to take on that where most people feel cannot be done, like the honorable member for the city, wanting to go where angels fear to tread. Sir, this is what we talk about when we talk about transformation. When we talk about making a difference, sir, as a government, making a difference in the lives of our people, this is what I am talking about. And most people will say, oh, that is nothing but a pipe dream. It will never become reality because they don't have the passion, they don't have the feeling. It is not within their DNA to deliver anything at all of substance. And that is why that period, which is called the lost decade, will remain with Barbadians forever. It will continue to be etched in our memory, and I want the children who are sitting here this afternoon to understand that no matter what you do, you should deliver the best from what you do. Whatever path you take in life, you should deliver the best from what you do and make sure that you make a difference, a positive difference in the lives of the people who you may serve or be associated with. And Mr. Speaker, there's potential in technology. A lot of what is required, sir, will require a tremendous amount of technology, processing, recording, sir, providing reports and audits. Those things will require a tremendous amount of technology. Sir, I recall when the travel trade was transitioning from an environment where when you were traveling, you had stacks of paper like this, and every time you go to the counter, do so and tear off piece, and that was your ticket. You show up at the airport nowadays and do like this, and you are checked into a flight. You go to immigration, you go to security, and you do like this, and you can get through. Pardon? The handheld device, sir. The handheld technology, the handheld device. And I stay away, sir, from calling these a phone because the multi-purpose activities that you can get from these, to see it as a phone is to confine it to a single device, and it really isn't. So I call it a handheld device because it gives you many other options. So, sir, passing through an airport, checking in at a check-in counter, you no longer need paper. But what you certainly need is technology, because you must be able to transition from paper to a paperless environment. And through the IATA Building and Settlement Plan, sir, this entire world pays out in the aviation industry billions of dollars on a weekly basis in a very seamless way through the use of technology. Whenever you purchase an airline ticket, you don't get an airline ticket anymore. You get a signal sent to your mobile device, to your iPad, to an email somewhere. If you choose to print it, that's entirely up to you, but you do not have to. And you can now provide an opportunity, sir, for young people to get into software development so that another opportunity arises for us to find new forms of employment for people, getting involved in software development, but equally also getting involved in training and getting involved and providing solutions, sir, for an airport that is moving to Category 1 status simply through the provision of technology. Mr. Speaker, the travel trade itself, if we are able to attract more carriers to Barbados because we have the capacity to carry them in, let us not fool ourselves. Unless we move our airport to a facility that can accommodate the amount of wide-body jets that will be required to touch down here, park, go through maintenance and those things, even perhaps use Barbados as a hub, we really need a facility. What we have is a space that is underutilized, unplanned for, sir, and not being seen for the potential that it can bring to Barbadians and for the potential that it can bring to our tourism industry and for the foreign exchange earnings that we can get, sir, from it if we move our airport to a 24 hours operation, holding the amount of wide-body jets similar to what Dubai challenged itself with, sir. Then we start to attract all of those carriers that make their way to Puerto Rico and Miami. And we can pull them in here in Barbados, the ones that are going to South America, even those going to Africa, sir. And then we start to create that bridge between Barbados and Africa where we can have a lot of the African flights passing through Barbados as well. Sir, I believe, sir, that I am not a dreamer. But if I have to dream, I am going to dream big. Because Grantley Adams Airport has the potential to give to Barbados that which we now need to find in terms of new areas of development and tourism, new areas in our deliverables in order that we can enfranchise our people, and new areas for us, sir, to be able to punch in the tourism sector world class and provide for us an opportunity just like Dubai did for itself by renewing Barbados, refreshing Barbados, and giving us an airport facility that stands the test of time and at the same time provide for us to have other developments. Because once you have that type of Category 1 airport surrounding the entire property, you're going to have investment coming simply because of the potential to do business. And that within the airport itself, the amount of top-class international designers that you may be able to attract simply because of your passenger base, sir. 29 million people passing through Dubai will give any investor excitement, sir, to be able to participate in the mall construct that is within that airport. And then, sir, if we were to think of our young Barbadians, those involved, sir, in craft, those who are involved in art, sir, if we can create a facility that allows for all of them to be positioned there, suddenly we have positioned Barbadians not only because they can sell a piece, but they can build a brand and create a name that can also go world class. And Mr. Speaker, I do not believe that we should limit ourselves Because at the same time, if we're going to build out capacity, then we're going to need maintenance. And if we're going to need maintenance, again, sir, we provide an opportunity then for those people who are involved in general work, who are involved in engineering, who are involved in providing maintenance for air conditioning and the like, and those who are providing maintenance for technology as well. Here is another opportunity, sir, for them to be enfranchised, sir. And that we have failed, sir, to even see the vision. That we have failed to recognize that with more carriers passing through Barbados, the more opportunities we are going to have as well to bring the cost of airfares down, because once you have supply outstripping demand, then prices would fall, sir. I'm being told, sir, repeatedly that I have to get production up in Barbados. I must get production up, I must get production up. And every time I look at it for what it really is. If we were to get production up, sir, what we are essentially doing is driving price down naturally. And that opportunity, sir, for anyone to miss. The high airfares that we pay right now, if you were to take away from the construction of the airfare, the duties that are in it, and I hear people have this conversation all the time, but anything that is ubiquitous, everybody wants to use. And so the fact that most governments would want to make sure that their duties are collected by way of the sale of an airline ticket is because, one, the money is guaranteed once it goes through the billing settlement plan, and two, you're going to make sure that you get your money fast and seamless. But, sir, if we do not recognize that with the airfares that are constructed, sir, many times because it is the sole carrier, there is no competition, the fare invariably starts at a higher price point. And that when there's competition, those who are jostling for market space will do what is required to make sure that they can stay in the market, unless, of course, there are elements of collusion, sir. And then, Mr. Speaker, our people have the potential to do more. I've seen develop in Barbados properties that are now going to what is called Airbnb. And Airbnb started as a concept where people who couldn't really afford a hotel accommodation and provide meals or purchase meals through the hotel were using small houses in regular communities, hence the concept community tourism, to come to a destination, stay in a house, and you may start with a breakfast, but then the rest is at you when you go on the road. And that concept has now developed to the point where it provides an opportunity for many more people now to travel and take advantage of an Airbnb arrangement. Mr. Speaker, think of what would happen if we were to develop to a position where we have more carriers home basing in Barbados because they're using Barbados as a hub. The opportunities that will come to us from the amount of passengers that would descend on Barbados, either through overnighting or using Barbados for an experiencer before going on to another destination. So these opportunities we have failed to take advantage of, and we have failed miserably because the vision was not there. And Mr. Speaker, you know, I have agitated for many years over how we do things to push people back rather than improve their lives. And I feel that we have a piece of legislation that we need to revisit. It is called the Travel Services Act, sir, where small people who get involved in business that is seamless now, because anybody that is involved in the travel trade now no longer has to go through the rigors of setting up a business like we did in the past. But the one albatross that still remains is being bonded, sir. And that I feel, and I have had my discourse on this for many years, the fact that I'm back at it now means that I feel it is something that should still be considered. And with a progressive government like this, it really ought to be considered. And I know my colleague and honorable member for St. Michael West Central will, being a fellow from the industry, will make sure that these changes take place, because I'm confident that he knows this business. Well, Mr. Speaker, bonding, where you literally hold $100,000 with a bank or insurance company, and every year you have to pay a premium, is something that we need to revisit. Because I feel that if a consolidated fund is developed and those monies are paid into that fund, people from within the travel trade can draw from that fund if they need financial support, rather than pay that money to insurance or hold it in a bank. That consolidated fund, sir, will provide an opportunity for building capacity in the travel trade, but equally protecting those people in the trade who may from time to time have difficulties. And I'll say to you that the most vulnerable in the entire travel trade were the travel agents, sir, when COVID came. And they had to find a way to recover simply because there was no access to funding. And sir, if there was a consolidated fund, they could have gone back to business immediately. And Mr. Speaker, I do not intend to delay this house, sir, because I recognize the hour. Well, Mr. Speaker, I personally feel that this bill will now put Barbados in a position where we can take aviation to another level, and that we can take the development of Grantley Adams Airport to another level, and that, Mr. Speaker, we can then provide new opportunities for enfranchisement in the tourism industry and in the travel trade and in international transport, sir. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 2:30 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 2:30 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 2:30 p.m.
but I always like to go back to first principles and try to be as simple as possible. Maybe it reflects what is in my head. But Barbados is an island. So you can't walk here from any other country. You either sail here or fly here. And the matter of civil aviation, which is passenger planes as opposed to military, and that's the reason why it's called civil. The matter of civil aviation has always, ever since the advent of aircraft and Barbados being involved, has been a very important part of the development of the country. The first major piece of legislation that spoke to tourism development is the Hotel Aids Act, which I think is a 1958 piece of legislation, the precursor to the Tourism Development Act and the Tourism Development Amendment Act. In 1958 would have been very soon after the first plane, relatively soon after the first aircraft would have landed in the country. And tourism, which was emerging at the time, because sugar had fallen on bad times. We know the history. Europe started to produce sugar from beets. The price in the world market was declining. We were benefiting to some degree from artificially propped up prices because we were still early on a colony of the United Kingdom. But agriculture, particularly sugar agriculture, was on the decline. And Barbados, for its over 300 years of settlement by the English, had been paying its way. That is probably one of the positives that we have benefited from and inherited to some degree. But Barbados had been paying its way. And so as Barbados sought to work out how we would find money to pay for services, even while a colony, because we were a colony until 1966, tourism became one of the areas that we looked to. Now, tourism didn't start in the 60s, tourism didn't start in the 40s. Tourism has been around for a long time. Cranes says since 1881. There's been Edgewater. There's been the one above Bathsheba, the Atlantis. The train system in Barbados was designed so that persons could get from Bridgetown to the East Coast, south and east, where the hotels were. But it also meant that, given that tourism was going to be the next stage of our development, or was going to fund the next stage of our development, aviation then became very important. It became important because we needed to bring people here so that they could enjoy what Barbados has to offer. And so because of all of that, and because tourism still retains leadership in the economy insofar as employment is concerned, and insofar as foreign exchange earnings are concerned, it means that the matter of civil aviation must continue to occupy lots of space in our brain, because upon the effective operation of our airport and everything that's covered by by civil aviation, the inspections, the arrivals, the entire gamut of activity that surrounds a plane leaving a destination and coming here, it must remain top of mind when we look at how we develop a country, when we examine the kind of framework we put in place to manage that activity. It is a very integrated activity, and the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, spoke to some of that in his presentation. It is not, and the Honourable Member for St. James Central, who piloted the bill, also spoke to that. It is not just a matter of a plane coming and landing at an airport. There's a lot more to civil aviation than that. There are lots of links along the way, a lot of links in the chain that would allow a country like Barbados, an island like Barbados, to benefit from planes landing in this country, landing and taking off. When you speak to tourism, you ordinarily think about people, visitors, sometimes called tourists, coming to your country and being able to get back home. But Mr. Speaker, many of our scheduled carriers, because we talk about skeds, we talk about charters, but many of our skeds, our scheduled carriers, do good business, are able to make money because of the cargo that also goes along with passenger traffic. And that is what helps to make the business model work. You carry passengers and you carry cargo. As a matter of fact, the business model is really, sometimes you will have some of the leaders in the airline industry will say to you, the front of the plane pays the bills, and the back of the plane and the cargo gives you the profit. So that the plane itself and the operation of the aircraft itself is its own business ecosystem. But surrounding that, we have, if there is going to be, when a plane lands, people clean the plane, there's refueling of the plane, there's provisioning, because even if they only serve nuts and water, somebody has to provide that for the aircraft. So that provisioning also becomes a business activity. Provisioning of supplies, provision of fuel becomes a business activity. So there are many benefits, many aspects to the whole economic system that surrounds the matter of civil aviation. The Honourable Member for St. Philip South spoke extensively to the matter of the airport itself becoming an experience that provides benefit for business people, small and large, and I agree strongly with the Honourable Member for St. James Central that not only Gucci should be available in the airport, but leather sandals by the gentleman from Temple Yard could also be available in the airport. It provides that kind of opportunity. We have many people collecting frozen stuff from outlets at the airport to take onto the planes with them because they miss the taste of our new national outlet. I almost say national dish, but national outlet. But there's lots that goes on, that will go on around this whole matter of civil aviation. And getting it right is important because quite a lot of our economic activity depends on us getting it right. Now, we've spoken to the matter of Category 1 status. Being in the top tier of anything carries with it many benefits. You, Mr. Speaker, are often referred to as being in the top tier when it comes to the representation of people who need good representation. If you want good representation, you just don't go to any and everybody. You go top of the line, as high up as you can afford. I added that because...
You used good terminology there. The last phrase sounds more applicable.
What you can afford. What you can afford. But you go to the top tier. And in every phase, every aspect of life, people strive to be in the top tier. Because that is what dreaming big is all about, aiming to be at the top. Now, there's absolutely no reason why a country like Barbados, which is so dependent on tourism, which is also dependent on airlift for so much of its economic activity, should be at Category 2. But the question has been, over the years, maybe as was said earlier, over too many years, how do we get to Category 1? How do we move from Category 2 to Category 1? A couple years ago, Prime Minister asked the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, the Honourable Member for Member for St. Philip West, and myself to go to Rock Hall, just outside the airport's fence, and to speak to the residents there. And one of the things that I shared with them coming out of my tourism experience is that for us to become the best, there are certain conditions that attend both the airport and the area immediately around an airport. And I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that Barbadians generally, not every single person, but Barbadians generally, when issues are explained, are able to understand what is being said and understand that all of us, have a role to play in our collective national development. And that was one of the issues, the whole flight path, the matter that speaks to if there's an emergency on takeoff. We know that the two most dangerous parts of flying are takeoff and landing. And the people understood. But I introduced that into the discussion because it is an important part of the discussion. Barbados depends on airlift. Some time ago, we spoke a lot, and I should have said this a little bit earlier, but it just come to my mind. Some time ago, we would talk a lot about our international business sector. And I've said, and I guess it was because I had a bias as a tourism professional, I used to say to my friends in international business, because many people who I work with I started my life in an audit firm. Lots of my colleagues went to what we used to call offshore companies because they paid lots of money. It seems as though I was never really interested in money, so I went into tourism, and now here I am. But I used to say, still not into money, but I used to say to those in international business that one of the reasons why investors out of Canada primarily, but also UK and US, found Barbados so attractive was not just the tax regime, but was the fact that on any given day, they had one or two choices in terms of which flight to take to get to Barbados, or what flight to take to get home. There are many other jurisdictions where you have to plan your schedule so carefully because the flights are not as consistent. But because of tourism, Barbados has had significant airlift over the years, and that has made it very attractive as a location for other types of economic activity. And that is, again, Mr. Speaker, a reason why we have to pay careful attention to how we manage civil aviation in this country. I want to thank the Minister and the Ministry, Permanent Secretary, and others who would have spent, and the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel as well, who would have spent quite a lot of time working through these pieces of legislation. These pieces of legislation will put us on the road to significant improvements in our air transport and in the management of the air transport. These pieces of legislation, once they are passed in this chamber and in the other place, will say to the international community, these folk are serious about improving their civil aviation management, direction, governance, the whole everything that relates to the management of that aspect of our existence. It will say to them that they are prepared now to focus on raising standards. We heard issues in terms of security. Obviously, has always been very important in civil aviation because civil aviation, from time to time, becomes a tool of warfare. So when planes are brought down, when planes are hijacked, that is civil aviation being moved into the realm of what really should be Air Force and a war footing. So security is vitally important for the safety of all those who fly on passenger planes. Training is very important because the whole matter of air traffic and the guidance of planes into a country, air traffic control becomes critical. Critical. With all the technology in the world, we are still on this planet reliant to some degree on air traffic controllers helping us to have safe landings of aircraft. We've had for quite a while a situation where persons who work in air traffic have not been able to progress, have not had the benefit of exposure to the kind of training that will allow them to move forward. And in recent times, when I've been working with the Ministry of the Public Service, we've heard from the workers' representatives that this is a matter that we need to address. Persons who are cadets for too long, who've not been able to make the next step forward. I am happy, Mr. Speaker, that with the passage of this legislation, some assistance will be unlocked that will allow us to be able to have our people trained so that even as we move to become Tier 1, Category 1, we do it through improving not just systems, improving not just facilities, but also improving the skills of our people. And there's absolutely no reason why the country that in my father's era and in my mother's era trained teachers for the Caribbean, there's absolutely no reason why Barbados cannot be training air traffic controllers for the Caribbean. We are an educational hub. And this is an area, a very technical area, an expert area that other countries will benefit from. When Barbados acquired an international airport, there were hardly any other Eastern Caribbean countries with international airports. Now, many of them have large commercial carriers flying in directly, and there are needs in some of our sister islands that we can, as good neighbors, be in a position to help to provide, to help to address. And I would want to say that we really have to look at all of the spin-offs that come from Barbados paying the attention that it ought to place on this matter of civil aviation. There's the whole matter of maintenance, additional carriers. These are all areas where the persons, we have lots of people in our country who we consider to be very highly educated. And as far as I am concerned, there is no reason why many of our engineering graduates, our computer science graduates, or our sci-tech graduates from the university, from the campus at KFL, should not be moving into aircraft engineering. And the more aircraft that we're able to attract, then the more job opportunities there are for persons in this country. And the passage of this piece of legislation and then the attendant action, we will see increased airlift. We'll become more attractive to carriers who do not now come to Barbados, particularly out of the United States, where these standards are held to, FAA and others, but these standards are held to very rigidly, and I would add, as far as I'm concerned, correctly so. And that is one of the reasons why we have to make it to the next level. We have to become more attractive so that we can attract more planes, more passengers, and create on the ground here in Barbados more job opportunities for our people. One of the last things I want to say, it was mentioned earlier, but whenever I think about the fact that the administrator and the investigator could end up being the same person, I reflect on my accounting training. And as an auditor in my early life, one of the first things an auditor is asked to look for when he or she goes into an organization to conduct an audit is if there is any blurring of the lines in terms of separation of duties. Now, it is absolutely unacceptable that someone who is an investigator is also an administrator. That makes no sense, but it is something that we have found, a situation we have found ourselves in, because we do not have the correct and proper regulatory oversight in this important area. And Mr. Speaker, as a government, we have come to the position where it cannot continue. And even though we have come to office and we have found all of these deficiencies, I think you, sitting where you sit, and I hope the public as well, is able to recognize that one by one, we are addressing outstanding issues in this country that maybe ought to have been addressed years ago. But we cannot sit in office in 2022 and moan about what should have happened in 2005. As a government, we have made the decision that we will address these matters. We recognize that civil aviation is important to our very existence. We earn so that we can provide social services. We earn for an exchange so that we are able to import those things that we do not produce. In order for us to do that, we must have our tourism industry firing on all cylinders. In order for that to happen, our civil aviation regulatory framework must be in place, but must also be at the level that will allow us to be attractive to all the major airlines that exist in the world, but those that can produce benefit for us. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is because of all of those reasons that I am compelled to support this legislation. This legislation is not the silver bullet. Work still needs to be done, but this legislation, these three pieces, 2 or 3 pieces, are an important part of the way that we get to the final destination that we want to reach. In everything that has to do with governance, the framework must be in place, but the framework must be right. And these pieces of legislation represents this country's attempt to make sure that the framework is right, so that our technical people are able to, using this framework, take us to that level we want to get to. Our intention is to reach Category 1 status so that the International Air Transport Authority and all those FAA, all those organizations that mark you according to how well you're doing in terms of your regulations, we are able to say to them confidently, we have set the framework in place. We are training our people. We are putting our facilities in order so that we can reach that next level. And I want, Mr. Speaker, to commend these bills to this Honourable Chamber and to say that I have absolute confidence that they will work in a significant way to improving how we operate as a country, but also in supporting that most important industry that we have at this point, the tourism industry. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this important piece of these two bills. Very clear in my own mind, sir, that often we have come to this chamber and laid the foundation, sir, with respect to what we have agreed to out of consultations with the social partnership. And given that we have just debated in this Parliament, sir, the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan 2022, I take the liberty at the outset, sir, just to remind the Chamber and the House, and the public, what we stated in that very important document, but not just what we stated in the document, sir, but to remind the country that this government continues to honor its commitments to the transformation, sir, of Barbados. You would recall, sir, that during that debate, we articulated very clearly that we felt that we, notwithstanding the challenges of COVID-19, that we certainly have restored the economic stability that the country required, and that we now must focus on the clear elements to achieve growth, but particularly, sir, to transform Barbados. And I believe that these two bills that we are debating today, sir, form part of how we will transform not just the civil aviation sector, but I believe, sir, fundamentally, how we transform Barbados. And paragraph 137 of the Burt document, sir, spoke to a reform of the civil aviation legislative framework will create expanded opportunities for the development of new air routes. As you know, sir, the document is already a document of the House. New legislation has been drafted establishing a civil aviation authority, an accident investigation unit, and an air navigation services unit as part of contemporary aviation policy in line with ICAO standards, International Civil Aviation Organization. This new legislative framework and the attainment of ICAO standards will lead Barbados on a path to Category 1 status, and with it, the attraction of new carriers. This will significantly expand airlift with the US market and in turn onwards to the Caribbean region and the African continent with Barbados as a southern travel hub. I take the opportunity to deliberately quote that, sir, to indicate to the public that when we say that we are embarking on a second iteration of the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation, that what we do here in this chamber, as well as what we do with respect to the provision of financial resources and the implementation of this specific set of legislation, that we are not waiting, sir, until we reach the formal approval with respect to the support that is coming from the international agencies, sir, that this government continues, sir, with respect to the transformation work that is required to be able to bring jobs to this country to help build out a capacity, sir, for exports, of which, sir, this particular area for far too long has been outstanding. And the truth is, sir, that I know that the honourable member who led the debate and others can attest that the truth is we have long focused on getting people here, yes, and rightly so, as the tourism element. But I believe that that other part of the ministry, sir, that speaks to international transportation is where we have come to start to remedy, sir, perhaps the lack of attention over time to be able to put Barbados on a completely different footing. And therefore, as we embark on this new version of BERT, this particular piece of legislation being debated today, or these two pieces, sir, being debated today, perhaps represent the first steps with respect to our implementation of the BERT plan to ensure that we can change course, sir, with respect to moving Barbados forward. But this piece of legislation only makes sense, sir, in the articulation of what we are also doing and I know the Honourable Member for St. Philip South spoke, but what we're also doing in relation, sir, to the work to improve food security in Barbados and the region. Because our capacity to create a logistics hub, sir, means that we must actually start to do things, sir, that will allow for this expansion of the civil aviation space to actually make sense, sir, to be able to leverage Barbados as that logistics hub, which, as we all know, sir, historically, all of the trading ships coming west, sir, stop here first. And they stop here first to distribute, sir, all of the cargo before they either came west or when they headed back north, sir, to move the items that they so desire to do. And therefore, as we seek to create new partnerships, as we did, sir, at the beginning of September by hosting the first Afro-Caribbean investment conference supported by the African Exim Bank, then I hope that Barbadians will understand that when this government says that we intend to transform the space, we should not fear, sir, the activities that we're generating, because the extra activity that will come from not just expanding production, but establishing the food terminal right here in Barbados by having expansion, the production being expanded in Guyana and as well as Suriname. And I know that the Honourable Member for St. Philip South is also working to ensure that we can unlock, sir, additional access to agricultural goods and products coming out of the northern Brazil state of Roraima, will equally add, sir, to the already extensive both airlift as well as cargo that goes from a maritime perspective that leaves Barbados, that we'll be able to start filling containers, sir, with respect to moving stuff, not just around the region, but being able to export out of Barbados. Equally, sir, I know that the Ministry of Agriculture is advanced with respect to the sanitary and phytosanitary legislation. And that too, sir, will play a critical role with respect to what we now do, sir, with respect to what takes place within the civil aviation space and the expansion of airlift and connection of new routes to be able to get goods and services, sir, to and from Barbados in a way then that makes commercially viable sense for all the various stakeholders involved. And therefore, this really must be seen, sir, as a very critical component of the puzzle, sir, in how we help to transform Barbados. And it is critically important, sir, that even in the context of yet to be resolved regional travel services, with the demise, sir, of LIAC, you would appreciate that not just these regulations and the legislation, which the legislation will support, but how carriers operate in the region going forward. I believe, sir, that given all of what we are already setting in train, will help any new regional operator that may choose to come to operate from Barbados, will help also, sir, to change the business model with respect to what was being done before. And therefore, it is critically important that as ordinary Barbadians, and the Honourable Member for St. Peter just indicated that it is, I think, all of us appreciate during the pandemic the importance of aircraft landing here and the complexity of activities that are triggered, sir, whenever aircraft lands at Grant Adams Airport. And therefore, it should not be lost on us that our ability, as we started out in the original berth, sir, the plan was to double, sir, the throughput of passengers in the shortest possible time, as you know. We had embarked on an exercise to engage with respect to a PPP to be able to help build capacity within that space. That plan still remains the case, sir. But I want Barbadians to imagine, sir, because I know that sometimes it is, as we seek to push through improvements, there's always some measure of disruption or dislocation. But I want Barbadians to imagine that we have grown accustomed to activities at the airport between 2 o'clock and 5 p.m. in the afternoon, sir, as peak time. That we really want to have activity at the airport 2 to 5, sir, to be relevant throughout the course of the operation of the airport. Because the mere fact, sir, that we have, for a large part of the day, significant downtime, means that, one, the investment in the real estate is not getting the type of return of investment that it should. It means that the equipment and the investment in terms of not just the safety mechanism, but also the operators that provide goods and services within the space, that you're not yielding the same level of return as a similar size airport moving similar numbers of passengers as well as cargo. And therefore, as you would appreciate, sir, that as we discussed within the context of the plan, that the World Food Program is already establishing, sir. We signed an agreement with the World Food Program to establish a hub right here in Barbados, which equally, sir, will serve as a logistical hub for the region, which brings additional services and opportunities, sir, not just for local producers, but certainly regional producers, but equally, sir, with respect to enhancing our capacity within the logistics space. And therefore, whether you're a truck driver, sir, moving goods and services to and from that space, in the same way that we do the air-to-sea transit with respect to passengers during the winter season, the reality is that we want to be able to, as I indicated, be able to double the number of passengers going through the airport. But coming with that equally, sir, is to building up the capacity for moving cargo in and out of the airspace. And obviously, sir, the more airlines you have traveling through the space, it means then, sir, more revenue with respect to the Civil Aviation Authority, which the structure is set up to do, because at the moment, sir, as we all know, that revenues are currently being collected by a CARICOM neighbor, and we want to be able to put that to rest in order to ensure then that we can collect that revenue, which is due and owing to Barbados with respect to aircraft transiting the airspace. But in addition to that, sir, as you know, we have already engaged with the support of the African Exim Bank, being able to unlock, sir, traffic moving directly to and from the African continent. We have received some expressive interest from airlines to be able to support that. And therefore, sir, it will require not just the support to move people, but once we're able to open up the markets with respect to the transit of cargo and the provision of whether they're agricultural products or any other manufactured goods, sir, from Barbados, certainly to the rest of the African continent, being able to move those resources, whether by sea or even by air, I know that as this bill contemplates, the reality is that once we can get direct links, sir, within that space, then we know that we will be able to enhance not just the tourism product, but ordinary Barbadians will be able to also to visit directly through the continent without having to go through northern airspaces and having to subject oneself to transit visas and the like with respect to a number of those initiatives. But there's a very, very, very clear and lucrative wedding market within the West African countries, sir. And Barbados is well poised, sir, to be able to leverage a significant part of that. And therefore, establishing this type of framework, as well as which then will pave the way, sir, with respect to direct access flights. And I know that support will be forthcoming with respect to being able to establish that in the short term. Then that too adds additional activity, sir, which these bills will be able to help usher in with respect to being able to have access to a different segment of the international tourist market, and therefore be able then to help build up not just Barbados's tourism product, but certainly the international transport product, to be able to get more traffic coming directly, sir, to Barbados, and equally, as we said, sir, with respect to being able to export more, that once we're able to settle that SPS framework, that we will be able, sir, to export globally any of our products, because they clearly will be certified to so do and move. And therefore, no matter where the air traffic goes, sir, we anticipate that we should be able to get whether it is poultry, fish, or any other product that may need to be moved quickly, that we can get those out on the aircraft, no matter where they're going, to be able to help ordinary poultry farmers in this country, or the fishermen, sir, who ply their trade, to be able to get their produce out into those spaces in numbers, such that we can help build the foreign exchange earning capacity of the country, so that whilst we are moving people in, and certainly as Barbadians will seek to explore, given these international opportunities, that the clear sense that the ordinary Barbadian, whether you are a poultry farmer, sir, or a fisherman, or any of the other areas for which the SPS will apply, that ordinary Barbadians can be included in the recovery, but we must be mindful, sir, that the standards that we will seek to introduce within those areas are clear, such that we can expand the scope of the business beyond the 166. And therefore, this government, in executing, sir, this Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, intends to ensure then that we can have a very clear export-driven strategy, that every segment, sir, of our society, every segment of the economy can participate, and therefore it is up to the various ministries, departments, and agencies to be able to sensitize their stakeholders as to the opportunities that exist with respect to why we are doing this bill today in this way, and how it would potentially unlock avenues of opportunity, so long as we're able to not just bring the standards, but to have the accompanying financing, which is already agreed provisionally, to be able to help ordinary people, small businesses, medium businesses in this country, to be able to expand the scope, reach into new markets, and then allow for a better standard of living with respect to ordinary Barbadians. This is not going to be easy at all, Mr. Speaker, but it requires us to remain absolutely focused without being distracted by the noise that we are hearing on the airways on a daily basis. This government, sir, continues to work to make sure that what we say we will do, we are doing, but now ensuring that the stakeholders for whom these things will matter, and will matter with respect to the bottom line, will matter with respect to the expansion of their businesses, will matter with respect to being able to support families across this country, sir, and to create jobs, that these are the things that we are committed to doing, sir. I am proud that we are doing this today on the eve of just having done the resolution on the work plan a couple of weeks ago, and therefore, this government's track record, sir, will remain strong. But as I said, sir, these are the things that really will matter with respect to ordinary Barbadians as we move forward. So the transformation, sir, that we speak about is not just some esoteric thing that's in the ether, sir. This is going to translate into how ordinary citizens in this country can feel a real sense of the connection between what we do right here in this parliament and how we are able to mobilize domestic financing as well as international financing, sir, not just to build out the architecture at the airport from a technical level, but to allow, as I said, sir, whether you're a regular poultry farmer, whether you're a regular fisherman, sir, or any of the other professions, sir, that operate within the agricultural space, the logistics space, sir, to be able to ensure then that this part of the transformation, sir, can be secured. But as I said, sir, our overarching objective is to ensure that the recovery is inclusive, and therefore I ask Barbadians, sir, to remain focused, stay the course, and that to allow this government, sir, to continue to do that which we know must be done in as short a time as possible, sir, because as the honourable members have already articulated, these things have remained undone for far too long. And as we get about the business of transforming this country, we must not dilly-dally, sir, as we would say. We must simply get on with the exercise of being able to ensure that we know we do that which we must do, but we commit to ensuring that we engage consistently, sir, with the stakeholders in order to get things done. The Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, sir, as I indicated, that particular pillar of establishing Barbados as a logistics hub actually means something, sir. It is not just talk. These two bills that we're debating today form part of delivering on that particular pillar as part of the growth strategy. And therefore, when those are out there, those persons out there talking about where the growth is going to come from and all of these types of things, sir, we are getting on with the active work of creating the avenues for growth. We will encourage as much of the domestic private sector, sir, to come on board to facilitate that growth. But I must say to all and sundry, sir, that these things that we do here, in addition to the fact that we have received, sir, an upgrade with respect to our long-term credit rating on the external side, sir, these are signals to all investors, sir, whether domestic, regional, or foreign, sir, that Barbados is simply getting on with with its business to be able to put us on a sustainable growth path. And therefore, we will work with all investors. Of course, sir, we will prioritize those domestically who are serious about exporting, because we want to make sure that Barbadians create a new culture and a new ethos focused, sir, on building exports, earning foreign exchange, and these form part of the pillars that will allow us to be able to do that. And so, sir, these two bills I absolutely support from certainly as a member of Parliament, as I will encourage all of my constituents, as I know all of us will do, sir, to ensure that wherever they can participate in any of these areas with respect to building out not just the civil aviation, but the connections with respect to being able to access that is going to be critical. And therefore, as members of Parliament, we must continue to make sure that we keep our people focused, take advantage of the opportunities, take advantage of the financing options that will come on stream with respect to open up these spaces, and therefore allow us to be able to create a better life for all of our people, sir. As you know, we've continued to do so over the last 4 years, and therefore implementing the BERT program, of which these two bills form a critical part, will help ordinary Barbadians to be able to see that better life. And with those very few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join with my colleagues in supporting the Civil Aviation Bill before this chamber this afternoon. I promise you, Mr. Speaker, I won't delay the chamber unduly, and I will be very short. And I want to assure the honourable member for Christchurch East Central that I have taken careful note of his comments. And in so doing, I understand clearly the signals that he continues to send. And therefore, I want to assure him that the government, as it has done and continues to do, will do everything within its power to ensure that the goals of the BERT program, plus as recorded, will certainly keep us in good stead. Mr. Speaker, there is no denying whatsoever that aviation reform is central, indeed crucial, to Barbados's economic success. It was said before that without aviation, certainly travel to Barbados, a lot of what we can land in Barbados in short time would take extraordinary lengths of time to do so were it not for aviation. And indeed, based on a tourism-based economy, it is absolutely necessary that we continue to reform aviation as it continues to contribute to Barbados' success. It also continues to open major global links that we need so badly in this part of the region. And as we embark upon the reforms as needed, I am certain that those reforms will continue to sustain Barbados' tourism development, and those reforms will clearly help us to realize the goals and objectives that we set as a government. Mr. Speaker, the Grantley Adams International Airport has served this country well, going back to the days when we refer to it as Sewell International Airport. And it is not only because we are able, well, certainly pre-COVID, we can probably record in excess of 2 million passengers coming through the Grantley Adams International Airport, not because, and thanks to the Barbados Labour Party expansion program at Grantley Adams International Airport, that you have perhaps over 50 shops and more than 3,000 workers directly working with the Grantley Adams International Airport, and indirectly, of course. But when you look and see what we as a government continue to do to build out the infrastructure, and this bill certainly will allow us to have further infrastructural works, not only to sustain employment for Barbadians, but also to increase employment opportunities for Barbadians. In respect of the work undertaken by the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, and I certainly would like to commend and thank all those workers who were involved in this exercise. As we reviewed it at parliamentary group meeting, you can, and we heard from the Minister of Tourism, it was a task, a major task that had to be undertaken. But I would also like to thank the staff in the Office of the Attorney General, and particularly the staff in the CPC, because they would have contributed in no small measure to what we have before us as a civil aviation bill. And to all of those workers who, and particularly on the aviation side of the business. Mr. Speaker, like you, I'm not an expert in aviation, but I understand the critical importance of aviation to Barbados's economy, and particularly in respect of tourism. And that is why it is absolutely important that the safety of the Grantley Adams International Airport and that the safety of aircraft landing here, that has to be a core priority in any framework for the successful, not only transition and sustainable approach to the development of a country, but recognizing that when you are part of an international civil aviation organization, that you will have to conform to at least the minimum standards that are required by those organizations. Of course, the minimum standards are set, and Barbados, like any good country, would wish not only to meet the minimum standards, but to exceed them. And certainly, it demonstrates, and what we're doing here today demonstrates Barbados's highest level of commitment in respect of reforms in, as it relates to the systems and structures at the Grantley Adams International Airport. Like I said, Mr. Speaker, safety is a very important consideration. Whenever a person decides to travel to a destination, they think safety. They think about airport safety, they think about on island safety, they think about safety at the property, the hotel that is that they're going to stay. So safety is a very important consideration in any visitor wishing to come, or any potential visitor wishing to come to Barbados. Safety is in fact, is the highest ranking factor in determination of any person contemplating a visit to Barbados. And therefore, the study of aviation, as it has proven over time, gives persons the confidence to come to Barbados and other countries when you know that you can land at the Grantley Adams International Airport and that you will not have any obstacles on the tarmac, or you will not have any person run across the tarmac, or you will not have maybe any animals, for example, run across the tarmac, is a sign of great confidence. And you know, oftentimes when we travel and we land at Grantley Adams International Airport, we don't sometimes recognize the significance of these things. There's the Grantley Adams perimeter. Excellent perimeter is, Mr. Speaker. When you look at the length of the runway, when you look at the amount of money, and I don't have the numbers here, and I forgot, probably should have gotten that, but when you look at the amount of spend that the government of Barbados had to inject in the renewal of the Grantley Adams International runway, in fact, an expanded runway, it tells the story about how we as a government view infrastructure, but how we view infrastructure, especially at our lone international airport, for our future success. We are fortunate, Mr. Speaker, like I said, that we can continue to build on tourism. Yes, we went through a period of COVID, and that has had a knock-on impact on everything remotely connected to everything within the economy. But now we are at the tail end of that, and I can say that as Minister of Health, we now have to pursue now our objective and our aggressive strategy of growth. And if we continue to do what we are required to do to ensure that we do not get any negative ratings at Grant Williams International Airport, then I say that we have to salute all those who have put in the effort and the infrastructure that the government expended at the Grant Williams International Airport to maintain its ranking and status as an international airport. Mr. Speaker, when I leave Grant Williams International Airport and you are departing and the plane is on the runway and you see that long takeoff, Mr. Speaker, and you sit back as you lift and you look to your left or you look to your right, depending on where you're sitting in the aircraft, you cannot but say that Grant Williams International Airport is indeed very iconic. But when you look at the length of the expanded length of the runway, you must say that the government made the correct investment. And we did so, Mr. Speaker, because as you're aware, engineering is changing. There's some, Boeing will construct a new aircraft that perhaps may be bigger. You might have a wider body jet. And Mr. Speaker, we are prepared for that at Grant Williams International Airport. So I had to make that point, Mr. Speaker, to complement the vision of the Barbados Labour Party government in terms of where it wants to go. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there are things that we have to do, we have to change, and that too shall come. But we have to recognize that if we are going to prepare ourselves to remain competitive and to become and to maintain a sustainable tourism industry, we have to look at the critical importance of aviation. Mr. Speaker, I am convinced, and the member for Christchurch East Central made the point, that there are going to be expanded economic opportunities and aviation opportunities for Barbados. When we start to look at our routes and all the work currently being undertaken by the Ministry of Tourism, when you look and see about all the preliminary work that they have put in place, I am convinced that Barbados will see the expansion of routes into Barbados, and that with additional tweaking, we can also realize additional benefits coming to Barbados. I'm with the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central when he says that we should not only concentrate on refer to the afternoon core and also the morning, but we also peak times or non-peak periods, as we might say now, that we can utilize the Grant Williams International Airport. I mean, Mr. Speaker, we all know the economics of the airline industry. They tell me that when an airline is parked at the gate, is losing money. It is meant to fly. And therefore, the simple equation should also relate to an airport. An airport without an aircraft parked at the gate is an airport that is losing money. And therefore, we have to start looking at additional expansion and opportunities for expansion so that we can have more airlines coming to Barbados, having them parked at the gate so that we can get some landing fees, and that we can importantly bring additional visitors and freight, I may add, our cargo as I refer to it, to Barbados. So, Mr. Speaker, I did indicate to the chamber that I will not be too long, and I don't want to exceed my mandate and exceed my word that I would have given to you. Safe to say that I am sure that after tomorrow I will have an opportunity to speak on matters relating to this subject matter, and to carry on from the solid work done by my colleague minister. Yes, and the work that my colleague minister would have started and obviously would have executed on behalf of this great party, the Barbados Labour Party. And I wouldn't want to get myself in trouble now by speaking to matters for which I have no constitutional responsibility. But in the spirit in which is said and given, Mr. Speaker, I really have to express my thanks to all of those and really reiterate it, because, you know, when you think about a civil aviation authority, when you think about all the work, as like I said, Mr. Speaker, the expansive brief that we received, you must say that they have done a tremendous job in helping to guide us. I know we have to move to the implementation stage. This is what we consider to be the first stage when you have the legislation, once it clears both houses, We have to move now to implementation. And that is when, obviously, the rubber meets the road, because you have to execute. And that is the part that will be coming. So with all that, Mr. Speaker, I want once again to commend the Ministry of Transport and Ministry of Tourism, and International Transport. I want to commend all those who were persons and involved in this exercise and bringing this Civil Aviation Authority bill. It was, I know it was long overdue, not due to the fault of the Barbados Labour Party, because we came into office and we had to fix a lot of things, and this is about another chapter in the story of fixes that we have to execute. So with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I'm much obliged. Thank you.
Honourable, that's the mic saying GM Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to wrap up this debate, and in doing so, I want to thank all honourable members who spoke. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that today has been a very useful day in that we have lifted the gaze of the people who sent us here to represent their interests and have been party to a process that has invited them, at any rate, to look into the possibilities of the future. The institutional realignment that we are doing and the institutional development that is going to be coming, sir, is something that brings us into the zone of a best practice, an international best practice, and it helps us to solve problems, sir, which pre-existed this administration. It pre-existed the administration before that, this one, and the one before that. And to that end, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, this is now a national development issue. I am particularly pleased that we've been able to discharge this responsibility without undue partisan political rancor. And I would want to imagine, sir, that now the way forward should be paved with a certain sense of not only the priority of the time, but the importance of the nation to rally around this very useful developmental objective. So that with those few words, sir, I urge that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Your Honour do now leave the chair and that the House be resolved into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not lose the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, this is a very long bill, and we ask the House's permission to call in parts.
So granted.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that clause 1 stand part.
Back to second.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 1, clauses 2 and 3.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that part 1, clauses 2 and 3 stand part.
Back to second.
The question is that part 1, clauses 2 and 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 4 to 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, clauses 4 to 7 stand part.
Part 2.
Clauses 4 to 7 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
3, clauses 8 to 13.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, clauses 8 to 13 stand part.
The question is that Part 3, clauses 8 to 13 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 14 to 17.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, clauses 14 to 17 stand part.
The question is that Part 4, clauses 14 to 17 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 18 to 24.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 5, clauses 18 to 24 stand part.
The question is that Part 5, clauses 18 to 24 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 6, clauses 25 to 33.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 6, clauses 25 to 33 stand part.
The question is that Part 6, clauses 25 to 33 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 34 to 39. Part 7, sorry, 7. Part 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 7, clauses 34 to 39 stand part.
The question is that Part 7, clauses 34 to 39 stand part. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 8, clauses 40 to 65.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I beg to move that Part 8, clauses 40 to 65 stand part.
The question is that Part 8, clauses 40 to 65 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 9, clauses 66 to 71.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 9, clauses 66 to 71 stand part.
The question is that Part 9, clauses 66 to 71 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 10, clauses 72 to 77.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 10, clauses 72 to 77 stand part.
The question is that Part 10, clauses 72 to 77 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 11, clauses 78 to 86.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 11, clauses 78 to 86 stand part.
The question is that Part 11, clauses 78 to 86 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 12, clauses 87 to 100.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 12, clauses 87 to 100 stand part.
The question is that Part 12, clauses 87 to 100 stand part. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 13, clauses 102 to 103. 101, sorry, to 103. 101.
3. Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 13, clauses 101 to 103 stand part.
The question is that Part 13, clauses 101 to 103 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 14, clauses 104 to 110.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I beg to move that Part 14, clauses 104 to 110 stand part.
The question is that Part 14, clauses 104 to 110 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 15, clauses 111 to 129.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 15, clauses 111 through to 129 stand part.
The question is that Part 15, clauses 111 to 129 stand part. Honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 16, clauses 130 to 153.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 16, clauses 130 to 153 stand part.
The question is that Part 16, clauses 130 to 153 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the first schedule be the schedule to the bill. Be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule of the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule of the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the third schedule be the third schedule of the bill.
The question is that the third schedule be the third schedule of the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Fourth schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Fifth schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the fifth schedule be the fifth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the fifth schedule be the fifth schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Sixth schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the sixth schedule be the sixth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the sixth schedule be the sixth schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg that you now report to His Honour the Speaker the passage of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do no report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
All member St. James Central? Yeah, I know. The chairman's report the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that the bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it?
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that the bill be now passed and cited as the Civil Aviation Act 2022.
The question is that the bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it? This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 7, sir. In the name of the Honorable Senior Minister, Minister of Energy and Business Development, to move the second reading of the Civil Aviation, Air Navigation Service and Investigation of Accidents Bill 2022.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Your Honour do now leave the chair and the House go into committee, resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
Mr. Chairman, this bill, though not as long as the previous one, is still substantial and requesting the House's permission to call in parts. Thank you, sir. Clause 1. Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 1, Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I beg to move that Part 1, Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Part 1, Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 2, Clauses 3 to 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 2, Clauses 3 to 8 stand part.
The question is that Part 2, Clauses 3 to 8 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Honourable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 3, Clauses 9 to 13.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 3, Clauses 9 through 13 stand part.
The question is that Part 3, Clauses 9 through 13 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, Clauses 14 through 46.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 4, Clauses 14 through 46 stand part.
The question is that Part 4, Clauses 14 through 46 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, Clauses 47 to 57.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Part 5, Clauses 47 to 57 stand part.
The question is that Part 5, Clauses 47 to 57 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you now report to His Honour the Speaker the passage of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Member St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Civil Aviation, Air Navigation Services and Investigation of Accidents Act 2022.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Give me one. I didn't forget. I see the cognate things, right?
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until Friday, the 28th of October at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be adjourned until Friday, the 20th day of October at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 20th day of October at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.